Chapter 5080. She didn't want to waste time with this person, so she directly searched his soul to see what kind of plan the kingdom of Daluo had. Did they capture the people of the Qiao residence? Larry saw the two approaching, and it looked like they were going to search his soul. This guy's whole body shook, and he used his fingers to pull out a talisman. In a flash of golden light, he disappeared from the spot. Arbor was astonished and muttered to herself, "Sacred grade golden talisman." This person actually had a sacred grade teleportation talisman hidden on him. She had studied the golden talisman jade tome for so long, but she had never seen anyone else in this world who could draw a sacred grade golden talisman. Lord Jojo pondered for a moment, and her curiosity about the Hall of Heavenly Fate talisman incantation deepened. There must be capable people in the Hall of Talisman Incantation that she had never met before. Someone who could draw a sacred grade golden talisman. On Changle North Street, in an inconspicuous courtyard, young Master Omega Kitoku was wearing a plain and thin garment, and his expression was cold as he sat in front of a rockery in the courtyard, waiting for news. Soon, a tall and thin man quickly walked in, hurried to his side, and leaned over to whisper in his ear. The second young master frowned and nodded indifferently. "Do as I say." "Yes, young master." The tall and thin man, Fei Zhuang, flashed and disappeared from the courtyard. Dougal Ling jumped down from the eaves and lazily tilted his head with a smile. "I can't figure it out." "What can't you figure it out?" Young Master Omega Kitoku grumpily retorted. He was very irritated and didn't want to waste time with people. "I can't figure it out." "Aren't you also tired of seeing that Lily Air Zero? Why are you still helping them? Moreover, since the plan failed, it means that the people of Daluo have no value. Why are you still escorting them out of the capital?" The second young master coldly said, "Do you know who the king of Daluo is?" Dougal Ling shook his head. "I don't know." Actually, he wasn't that curious. It didn't matter if he knew or not. In any case, this country of Daluo probably had nothing to do with him. Omega Kitoku did not continue speaking. He only glanced sideways at him. "What are you waiting for?" "All right." Dougal Ling nodded helplessly. "All right, I won't ask you why, but sigh." He clearly wanted to get closer, but no matter what he did, he kept pushing her away. It seemed like he was pushing her further and further away. Moreover, now that the little girl knew about the second young master's identity, there was bound to be no result. Ever since he had returned from the River of Forgetfulness, the second young master had always been on the verge of exploding. He was like a walking volcano, and no matter who he saw, he was extremely displeasing to the eye. Even the eldest young master couldn't stand his bad temper and found an excuse to slip away. The kingdom of Daluo was beaten by the Tsang Prefecture's troops and horses. They fled from the grassland to the second young master's place. Ling clearly saw a trace of killing intent in second young master's eyes at that moment, but Ling did not know why he would help them. Second young master had a stubborn temperament and was a stubborn person. He must have his reasons for doing so. He flashed out of the courtyard, but before he could take 2 steps, he was blocked by a man in plain clothes. "The eldest young master?" Dougal Ling looked at Qin Xian with a puzzled expression. Eldest young master was deliberately waiting for him at this corner? Don't meddle in Daluo's affairs. Chapter 5081. When I came, I saw notices posted all over the streets to capture the fugitives from the state of Duoluo. Eldest young Master Qin looked calmly at Dougal Ling. "The entire city has been sealed off. That guy Mo Lien is personally leading a group of the capital's elite troops as they traverse the streets and alleys to capture this group of people." At this point, the eldest young master couldn't help but get angry. From the looks of it, that guy Mo Lien was truly a hypocrite. He was more adept at using insidious methods than anyone else. The guy had ordered people to set up testing talisman arrays all around the city gates. Anyone entering or leaving would have to pass through the talisman arrays. There wouldn't be any problem if an ordinary person walked through, but if an expert above the god realm passed by, those lousy talisman arrays would immediately beep incessantly. How would the eldest young master know so many things after entering the city? As soon as he floated through the talisman arrays, a fucking string of guards would run after him while brandishing their machetes. They would yell and call for nearby brothers to surround and intercept him. He was chased all over the streets by several hundred guards and almost didn't make it back. What a fucking scam. Was there anyone else like him? So what if they were God Realm cultivators? There were plenty of cultivators above the God Realm in Dragonflame City. Did they have to capture and investigate every single one of them? That was simply insane. Those remaining trash from the state of Duoluo are no longer of any use. It's only a matter of time before they are found, the eldest young master said indifferently. You won't gain anything by interfering. Dugaling was silent after hearing eldest young Master Qin's analysis. Eldest young Master Qin sighed and said, "You still don't understand?" Perhaps the Emperor of the Divine Prefecture had already investigated the identities of those people from the state of Duoluo from the very beginning. He was only waiting for this bunch of idiots to walk right into his trap. And we actually helped the great Emperor. Although they didn't want to admit it, reality proved that they had stupidly walked right into the Emperor's trap. Many thanks to eldest young master for the reminder. Dugaling cupped his hands at eldest young Master Qin. Since second young master has given the order, we have to do it no matter how difficult it is. Eldest young master, please be at ease. This subordinate will be careful and won't be easily discovered. Since eldest young master said that there were such testing talisman arrays all around the city gate, then he wouldn't go to the city gate to take a look. Eldest young Sir Qin couldn't help but shake his head speechlessly when he saw Dugaling cupping his hands at him before turning to leave quickly. You won't cry until you see the coffin. I'll let this fellow personally experience how much of a scam this MO brat is. After bidding farewell to eldest young Master Qin, Dugaling quickly headed for an inn in the city. Previously, the upper echelons of the kingdom of Daluo had stayed in this inconspicuous inn. However, with the current situation so tense, there was no guarantee that those upper echelons had already changed places. Dugaling's figure flashed as he walked out of the remote alley. He pretended to glance at the street casually. He saw a group of valiant and high-spirited soldiers wearing short armor neatly pass in front of him. There were many more patrolling guards on the streets. As expected, the security was much tighter. Just as he was pondering, he suddenly heard a series of beeping sounds coming from beneath his feet. He didn't pay much attention at first, but his heart involuntarily thumped when he saw all the pairs of eyes on the street looking in his direction. "Capture him!" a leading soldier on a horse yelled as he pointed in Dugaling's direction. Chapter 5082. Dugaling felt as if 10,000 horses were galloping across his mind. Before his brain could even react, his body had already started to run away. In an instant, many guards appeared from all over the streets and alleys. They held spears and swords in their hands as they yelled and chased after him. Dugaling's jaw almost dropped to the ground. He saw the commoners, who were used to this sight, squat to the sides of the road with their hands on their heads, allowing the group of soldiers to chase after others. Occasionally, they would look up and roll their eyes in disdain. It was as if this scene happened every day, and the commoners were already used to it. Dugaling cursed in his heart as he dashed up the tree and leaped onto the roof in a few leaps. What was even worse was that there were quite a few young faces on the eaves. They were holding a broken net in their hands and were trying to outflank him from all sides. "You motherfuckers," Dugaling had just started cursing when he saw 4 or 5 nets coming towards him. He didn't even have time to say anything and quickly jumped behind the eaves. He jumped and fled into the back alley. There are no signs of fighting in the Qiao residence. Clearly, the fake goods didn't alert anyone when they moved in. The 8 hidden guards arranged in the Qiao residence also disappeared at the same time. Tong stood in front of the young crown princess with his head lowered and reported everything to her. This subordinate has checked the traces. The crown princess family didn't leave behind any signs of being kidnapped. It seems like Tong's voice paused. He looked up slightly and saw Arbor looking at him. He quickly lowered his head and didn't dare to meet his gaze. He quickly said in a low voice, "Master and Madam's family seems to have left the Qiao residence on their own." Arbor frowned and opened a brocade box in his hand. He looked at the wooden tablets in the box. and his expression relaxed. In the middle of each tablet, there was a faint flame burning, as if it was embedded in the tablet. It pulsed with a strong vitality. These were the life lanterns of Qiao Zhongbong, his younger brother, sister, and second uncle's family in the Qiao residence. Now that the life lanterns were safe and sound and even had a strong vitality, it was clear that his parents weren't in danger. What the hell is going on? Jojo was puzzled. Crown Princess. A clear and loud voice came from the window. The young Crown Prince Consort looked over without batting an eyelid. There were only a few people who liked to poke their heads out of the window. Staying up late, having midnight snacks, and so on, all of them had this hobby and habit. Sure enough, not long after, Aoya's big head swayed outside the window. His bright smile was dazzling. I've investigated it thoroughly. Crown Princess, don't be anxious. His Highness said that he will tell you personally when he returns later. Master, Madam, and Second Master's family are very safe. Xiao Yao gave birth to a boy successfully last night. Master, Madam, and the others are very happy. Really, Arbor's eyes brightened, and a smile appeared on the little stoic's face. The large rock in her heart finally fell heavily. Yeah. Aoi nodded his big head repeatedly and said with a grin, His Highness told this subordinate to inform you personally when he returns so that you won't think too much. His Highness also said that Crown Princess's trap, testing talisman matrix is especially useful. He placed one in every street and alley, and as long as it beeps, he can immediately arrest someone. Also, that net specially used to trap Divine Realm cultivators is especially useful. Chapter 5083. That's a divine weapon invented by your Crown Prince. It specializes in tricking cultivators above God level, Arbor said expressionlessly, catching God-level cultivators off guard and trapping them. It wasn't me who took it out. It's not like all the tricking was done by this Crown Princess. Humph. Aoya's mouth twitched. Master and Mistress, they really are a family. Don't say who tricked more. Then this subordinate is going to work. Crown Princess, His Highness wants you to play for a while. His Highness will come back later to have dinner with you. The little Crown Princess made a sound of acknowledgement and saw Aoya's big head shrink down from the window. Play what? Lady Qiao pondered for a moment before waving her hand gently. Her figure then disappeared from the bedchamber. After learning that his family was safe, Arbor finally had the mood to do something else. Your Highness, the testing glyph arrays on the streets and alleys are not responding. Could it be that the other party learned their lesson and stayed in their rooms? His Highness the Crown Prince thought for a moment and shook his head. Right now, the city is under lockdown. Even if they don't come out, our people will go door to check. With the testing glyph, we can find out what cultivation level the person in the room has. They can't run away. Mo Lien snorted. The only thing we can do now is take a gamble and get out of the city as soon as possible. Only then can we have a chance of survival. So the remnants of Doruo will break through the city gates today? At the same time, countless teams were patrolling the streets and alleys, checking for suspicious people one after another. In a private room on the second floor of the overflowing fragrance garden, the curtain on the window was lifted slightly and put down in less than a second. Cough, cough. Heavy coughs were suppressed by that person's handkerchief, making muffled sounds. Master. The man coughed a few times and raised his face slightly, waving his hand at his subordinate. It was a very old face. Under the gray hair was a pair of tired eyes that were bloodshot. He looked like he had not rested for several nights. The subordinate used a black cloth to cover half of his face, only revealing a circle of pockmarks under his eyes, as if his skin had been burned by fire. After so many years, I didn't expect the gray-haired old man let out a long sigh. He is even more ruthless and decisive than before. I didn't lose to him, the old man said calmly. I only lost to the power in his hands. If he had such a large force, he could also suppress that person and make it difficult for him to continue living. However, he didn't. Some things once lost were gone. No matter how much one fought for them in the future, they couldn't be regained. The old man sighed in response. The subordinate hurriedly reminded, "Master, the most important thing right now is to get out of the city as soon as possible. Right now, everyone in the city is looking for us. The longer we stay in the city, the more dangerous it will be." Their plan had failed. Originally, they had sent people to mix in with Consort Dowager Qin's caravan returning to the palace, who knew that they would be stopped at the East Gate and their identities would be exposed on the spot. Even though they had decisively taken Consort Dowager hostage and fought for a chance of survival for themselves, protecting their master and escaping, their brothers had suffered countless casualties along the way. After being chased and killed all the way, they had just counted the number of people. Of the original 3,000 people, only 300 were left. The casualties were more than 80 to 90%. Chapter 5084. They had completely lost this scheme. "Heavenly fortune is only SOS, the subordinate said indignantly. "I originally thought that they could turn the tide, but I didn't expect, in the end, the thousands of harpies sent to help them were all killed by the Emperor's personal troops. Simply hateful." The gray-haired elderly man waved his hand with a wry smile. "I always knew that relying on others was ultimately futile. Unfortunately, he was clearly not capable enough to rely on himself. Alas, after scheming for so many years, he truly didn't want to wait any longer. With such a good cooperation opportunity in front of him, he only wanted to strive for it with all his might." Thump, 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 thump. Disorderly footsteps came from the bottom of the stairs, accompanied by the madam's unique shriek. Esteemed officials, how can our overflowing fragrance garden harbor filth? Everyone, lighten your footsteps. Our garden's ladies have been tired from the entire night and are currently resting." The black-masked subordinate's expression abruptly darkened, and his hand reflexively stroked the hilt of a saber at his waist. Afternoon. When Lord Xiao Qiao expressionlessly appeared in the empty space behind the Eastern Palace's sleeping quarters with a large pot of medicinal powder, 17 to 18 junior eunuchs and junior palace maids cowered and gathered together, looking at their crown prince consort with bitter gazes. "Assemble." Kai Chi stood on the side and waved the silk handkerchief in her hand, directing everyone to stand in line. The junior eunuchs and junior royal maids bitterly lowered their heads to glance at the medicinal bottles in their hands, extremely hesitant. Kaixio speechlessly twitched her mouth and coughed lightly, saying, "The crown princess naturally won't harm us servants. Drink it all, right?" Kaichi jumped down from the stone block and raised the small bottle in her hand, shouting energetically, "Everyone raise the bottle together and drink." The group of eunuchs and junior royal maids promptly closed their eyes like heroes about to go to the guillotine. At the same time, they stretched out their hands and raised their heads, gulping down the medicinal liquid in the bottle in one gulp. Although the little stoic was expressionless, the corners of her eyes and the tips of her brows imperceptibly twitched. "Please, this wasn't poison. Pass down the Empress order." A young eunuch with a round head and a fat head was jogging over with a smile on his face. The first thing he saw was the crown princess, who was standing in front of the crowd with a big pot in her hand. His expression froze for a moment, however, before he could react. The rows of maids and eunuchs standing opposite the crown princess fell to the ground with their heads covered. The messenger eunuch was startled, but he didn't cry out in alarm. The eunuchs and palace maids who had fallen to the ground quickly climbed up even faster. One by one, they stood upright. However, when they stood up, the messenger eunuch was so frightened that he fell to the ground. What a feast for the eyes! When dozens of little eunuchs and palace maids had their bodies and faces completely changed in front of your eyes, it was a horrifying scene that made your hair stand on end. What was more, when these little eunuchs and palace maids all transformed into a sturdy middle-aged man with an unshaven beard 3 minutes later, there was no need to mention the visual shock. The messenger eunuch fell backwards with a thump and closed his eyes. He had actually fainted from everyone's fright. The young crown princess expressionlessly turned her head to glance at the eunuch while holding the big pot. Her chin lightly pointed in that direction, and 2 black-clothed hidden guards twitched their eyes before instantly appearing behind her. Chapter 5085. Wake 'em up. The young crown princess shouted in a crisp voice. This eunuch by Imperial Mother's side was too weak. Why did he immediately faint the moment he reached him? It was simply laughable and comical. The young crown princess harumphed and waved her small hand forcefully. The two hidden guards hurriedly cupped their hands towards her and swiftly went forward to pick up the chubby eunuch. She raised her hand to pinch the eunuch's philtrum and lightly massaged 2 acupoints on his body. The chubby eunuch opened his eyes and was momentarily dazed. He stared blankly at the 2 hidden guards close by for a while. "What did you come here for?" The young crown princess shouted, calling back a portion of the eunuch's 3 souls and 7 spirits. He hurriedly struggled free of the 2 hidden guards' hands before going forward to reply to the crown princess's question. In the end, he saw 17 or 18 faces that were exactly the same at a glance. They all had the appearance of burly men with unshaven beards, and their clothes were somewhat tattered. Quite a few of them had prepared thin blankets and other things to cover themselves with. Their clothes were disheveled and comical as they stood in rows, each of them staring at him with strange gazes. "Mommy!" The chubby eunuch was so frightened that he sat down on the ground. He almost couldn't see the dozen or so identical faces in front of him. This eunuch only felt all the hair on his body stand on end. Seeing a dozen or so identical faces at the same time, this degree of fright was comparable to seeing a huge, ferocious beast appear in front of him. How can you serve by Imperial Mother's side when you're so timid? The young crown princess harumphed in displeasure with a stoic expression. "Stand up straight." The chubby eunuch hurriedly stood up after being yelled at by her. This guy's legs were so weak that he almost couldn't stand up straight. However, when he caught a glimpse of the crown princess's sharp gaze, he quickly straightened himself. Whoa, who did he offend? Didn't he just come to pass on an oral decree? He actually got such a big fright. So weak, so weak. Grand Crown Princess, Her Majesty, the Empress's oral decree. Please eat dinner together. Arbor blinked and nodded reluctantly. "Okay, go over there and wait for me. Stand further away." "Aye, yes." The eunuch's legs were still a little soft, so he stumbled when he walked. When he was a little further away, the little crown princess lowered her head to look at the big soup pot in her arms, and then looked at the palace maids and eunuchs in front of her. Kai Chi, who had a masculine face, hurriedly waved the handkerchief in her hand and said in a loud and rough voice, "Everyone, stand properly. Line up. Get ready." The young crown prince consort nimbly picked up that pot with a splash. A small pot of powder was poured onto everyone. The chubby eunuch in the central palace could almost hear the sound of his jaw dropping. They could only watch helplessly as the scheming crown prince consort splashed a pot of green powder onto everyone in the room. Kai Chi and the others in the first row had their faces covered with powder. They held their breaths and almost couldn't open their eyes. The eunuchs and palace maids in the 2 rows behind were in a slightly better condition. However, their faces were covered with green powder, which made them feel uncomfortable. The chubby eunuch silently shut his mouth. He suddenly felt that staying in the Empress's central palace was a very happy thing. It was really not easy for the palace maids and eunuchs who served the little crown princess. Arbor carefully observed the changes on their bodies. The moment the powder was sprinkled on them, the deformed bodies of these palace maids and eunuchs began to peel off their original appearance. Chapter 5086. The speed of recovery was really fast. In just a moment, these unlucky children revealed their original appearance. Kai Chi stretched out a hand from under the blanket, waved the handkerchief in her hand, and shouted, "Line up, line up. Line up like you did before. Pay attention. If you feel that your body hasn't fully recovered, stand in front." A group of little eunuchs and little palace maids, with a helpless expression, stood in line. "Does anyone feel anything wrong with their body?" Kai Chi shouted again. The little palace maids and eunuchs weakly drooped their heads and replied, "No." Kai Chi ran forward and said to the young crown princess, "Crown princess, it seems that everyone is fine. The medicinal powder that you invented, although the color and the taste don't seem to be very good, the effect is very good when used." Being able to change people's original appearance in just a few minutes, the effect was quite good. The young crown princess was also very satisfied. She walked forward in small steps, raised her small hand, and shouted, "Everyone did a good job." In view of everyone, this time, you have worked very hard to test the directional transformation liquid and the recovery powder. I have decided to give each of you a reward of 800 spirit coins. While speaking, the young crown princess heroically took out a heavy bag of spirit coins from her inner world, handed it to Kai Xiao, who was secretly smiling at the side, and ordered, "Give it out! Give it out now!" Everyone's heads, which were originally drooping, suddenly lifted up, and their eyes lit up. The jaws of the chubby eunuchs who were watching from the side dropped again. They suddenly felt that staying in the Eastern Palace to serve the young crown princess didn't seem to be a bad thing. Kai Chi's small face, which was covered with green powder, suddenly brimmed with a bright smile. She pulled the many little palace maids and eunuchs around her and hurriedly said, "Why are you all in a daze? Quickly thank the crown princess." The little palace maids and eunuchs hurriedly kowtowed to thank her, and their faces were full of happy smiles. The bag of spirit coins was quickly distributed. There were still about 1,000 spirit coins left in the bag. Kai Xiao originally wanted to return it to the little crown princess. In the end, the little crown princess waved her small hand generously. Use these remaining spirit coins to buy some fresh ingredients and fruits from the food store. You can have a sumptuous dinner tonight as a reward. The courtyard was filled with thunderous cheers, as if it was the new year. When the chubby eunuch left the Eastern Palace with the crown princess, he could still hear the laughter from inside, even after a long walk. Different people have different lives. As long as he casually tried a non-toxic and harmless powder, he would be rewarded with 3 months' worth of salary. He wanted to take back what he had just said. Serving the little crown princess in the Eastern Palace was indeed an excellent thing. Arbor followed the messenger eunuch to the central palace and was directly led inside. The head palace maid, Pearl, lowered her head slightly and said with a smile, "Her ladyship said that the crown princess doesn't need to be announced when she comes here. Just invite her in directly." The little crown princess expressionlessly asked, "What do you want to eat for dinner?" Pearl almost laughed out loud. She didn't expect the little crown princess to have such an interesting temperament. The menu was drawn up by His Highness the Crown Prince. It will definitely be very suitable for your taste. The little crown princess suddenly stopped and tilted her head. Who's crying inside? She could hear the deafening cries of the White Empress in the inner hall through the corridor. Sleep, wake up, and make up for 2 more nights. Chapter 5087. Pearl smiled awkwardly. "It's the 2 shameful things from the Fong family. They came to complain to your majesty. Crown princess, don't mind them. Your majesty will drive them away later. They won't affect your mood for dinner." From her words, it seemed that she didn't like the Fong family. The little crown princess wasn't curious and followed Pearl into the inner hall. There was a touch of sandalwood burning in the inner hall. A faint smell floated in the air. Queen Bai sat on a gold-threaded Phoebe Jinnan chair expressionlessly. She stared at the seat below. 2 women, one old and one young, were kneeling there. They were wiping their tears. The older woman cried and said, "Your Majesty, the old concubine has been missing for more than 8 hours. When I think about how she is being tortured, my heart feels like it's being pricked by needles. It's so uncomfortable." Queen Bai said expressionlessly, "The old concubine was kidnapped last night. If you were really worried, you wouldn't have waited until now to mourn. Moreover, old Consort Dowager is blessed by heaven. She's just missing now. There is no evidence that she has been killed. It's too early for you to mourn in front of me." The Empress's words were extremely rude. A young girl kneeling behind the woman quickly raised her hand and secretly pulled the corner of her mother's clothes. The woman was scolded by the queen and choked. She looked at the queen blankly and didn't know how to respond. The queen asked impatiently, "Why did you 2 come to the palace at this time?" The young girl behind the woman hurriedly walked forward on her knees and respectfully kowtowed to the Empress. "Empress, please understand. Father and mother were worried about Imperial concubine Dowager's safety and couldn't sleep all night. Therefore, this morning, Mother couldn't wait to bring me into the palace. It's not early. The queen sneered. It's almost time for dinner. The second wife of the Count of Huainan didn't want me to leave food for you, did she? The woman was speechless. She had heard that the queen was very good at scolding people. She originally thought that there might be some lies in the rumors. Who would have thought that it was true? Seeing that her daughter was so embarrassed by the empress's words that tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked so pitiful. As a mother, her heart ached for her daughter. However, the person sitting at the top was the high and mighty empress. She was incomparably noble. When the empress insulted them, they could only accept it obediently. Her daughter, Feng Mingyue, didn't even dare to cry. She was afraid that the empress would be unhappy when she saw it. She did not shed tears, but the tears were still swirling in her eyes. The empress was not blind. How could she not see it? The more he looked at them, the more displeased he became. He muttered to himself, "Why do the mother and daughter look so annoying?" She disliked women who were like daughter flowers the most. They would cling to men at the drop of a hat and would feel wronged at the drop of a hat. Moreover, she naturally felt that she hadn't said anything overboard. She had only mocked him a little, and he immediately looked like he was about to cry. It was extremely boring. "Your Majesty, the crown princess is here." Zhenju saw that the atmosphere was stiff and timely welcomed the little crown princess with a smile. When the empress saw her daughter-in-law's clean and expressionless face, her eyes instantly lit up. Chapter 5088. Jojo, come quickly, come to mother. The empress waved at her with a smile. Arbor stepped forward and bowed before walking to the empress's side. The empress pulled her to sit down. When the empress saw the little stoic, she immediately forgot about the mother and daughter kneeling on the ground. She only cared about pulling Arbor's hand and asked with a smile, "Child, have you been feeling unwell recently? Tell mother as soon as possible if you feel unwell so that the royal physician can come take a look." Empress by nagged with a smile. Back then, when mother was pregnant with little glutinous dumpling, this scoundrel brat tormented his mother quite a bit. Little glutinous dumpling isn't obedient? The little stoic asked curiously. He won't stop. Empress by waved her hand and said disdainfully, "He threw me up in the early stages. Everything I eat doesn't taste good." Jojo, Empress by pulled the little stoic over and sized her up. "I see that you're quite well. How's your appetite recently?" The little stoic shook her head expressionlessly. "I don't feel unwell. Everything I eat tastes good." The elderly nanny beside the empress couldn't help but twitch her mouth. She felt that the little stoic crown princess's conversation with Her Majesty the Empress was a bit comical. "That's good. That's good." Empress by nodded with a smile. The empress and the little crown princess conversed back and forth as if there was no one else around, but it made the kneeling mother and daughter duo Madame Bao die of misery. The two of them knelt there, not daring to wipe their mouths, much less stand up on their own. By the time Empress Bai finished chatting with the little crown princess, 5 minutes had passed. The empress turned around and revealed a stunned expression. "Why haven't you left yet? Is there something else?" Zhenju and the other royal maids all looked towards Madame Bao and her daughter. The mother and daughter duo instantly felt flustered with embarrassment. What could be more embarrassing than being ignored by others? The two of them had been ignored by Empress Bai until now. Now that she said this as if waking up from a dream, it made Madame Bao and her daughter extremely uncomfortable. They were from the Duke of Huainan's mansion and were the legitimate maternal family of old concubine Fong. Now that old concubine Fong had an accident, the mother and daughter came to the palace to show their filial piety. How could they be disliked by the empress? Zhenju stepped forward and curtsied. Holding back her laughter, she said to the mother and daughter, seconding Yang, "Miss Mingyue, please." Fong Mingyue's face alternated between green and white, her expression extremely ugly. The second wife of the Count of Huainan bowed submissively to the white empress, shrank her head, pulled her daughter's sleeve, and pulled her out. Who are they? When Fong Mingyue went out, she happened to hear the little crown princess ask in a crisp voice, which made her even more unhappy. The crown princess had been back in the capital for so long. but she still couldn't remember all the names of the madams and young ladies of the noble families in the capital. It's the second concubine of the Duke of Huainan's mansion. Empress Bai couldn't control her anger. I haven't seen the Duke of Huainan for many years. The older I get, the more confused I become. For the sake of Count of Huainan, she called her second madam. Did she really think that she was a madam just because she called her second madam? Old concubine Fong has such a big accident. Count of Huainan shouldn't send the second Ninyang of the Count of Huainan's mansion to the palace to inquire about things. Zhenju also whispered, even if Madam of Count of Huainan has been in poor health all year round, Count of Huainan should also send Miss Fong to the palace to inquire about things. The little crown princess touched her belly and said yes. She turned to look at Empress Bai. Mother, when is the meal? Everyone, they really couldn't keep up with the little crown princess's jumping thoughts. Chapter 5089. Everyone thought that the little crown princess had asked about Madame Bao and her daughter because she wanted to know more about the second concubine of Count Huainan's mansion, who knew that this little fellow only asked such a question and skipped over the matter as if it had nothing to do with her. The group of palace maids and nannies couldn't help but be speechless. Who did the crown princess take after with her eccentric personality? Her mother, Madame Wei, looked like a very normal woman. The empress laughed and said, Good, good, quickly serve the food. I don't know if little glutinous dumpling will be back in time. Let's not wait for him. Let's eat first. The little crown princess thought for a moment and reluctantly said, Then let's wait for him. Master, let's go quickly from here, come. The masked man who had escaped from the back door of overflowing fragrance garden supported the gray-haired old man with one hand and hurriedly fled into the alley. Inside Dragonflame City, buildings of all sizes were densely packed. The masked man supported his master with one hand and gripped a long sword dripping with blood in the other. His movements were very slow. After his identity was exposed from overflowing fragrance garden, the masked man had protected his master and fought their way out. The two of them were like stray dogs, exhausted from running for their lives along the way. Master. The masked man lowered his head and glanced at his master. The gray-haired old man panted heavily and raised his hand to wave at his subordinate. Don't worry about me. Let's continue. If they didn't hurry out of the city now, once they were surrounded, there would be nowhere to escape. The masked man took a deep breath. This subordinate has been rude. Master, please lie on this subordinate's back. Let this subordinate carry you. The gray-haired old man indeed couldn't walk anymore. After running for his life, his legs seemed to be filled with mercury. When he took a step, his legs couldn't help but tremble. Master, come up. The masked man urged again and pushed the old man onto his back. The old man lay on his back, took a deep breath, and said intermittently, Zhu Fei, if I can escape today, this old man will never forget your great kindness. Master, you don't have to say that. The subordinate called Zhu Fei said with a serious expression, If Master hadn't taken me in back then, I wouldn't be who I am today. Back then, my entire family was killed by an enemy. It wasn't easy for me to escape from the fire. If it weren't for the fact that Master sent someone to treat him, he would have died long ago. Zhu Fei's life belongs to Master. I will not hesitate to go through fire and water for Master. The old man nodded with a gratified expression. Zhu Fei turned a corner and almost bumped into someone. The long sword in his hand was very fast, and, as if it was a conditioned reflex, he stabbed towards that person's chest. Wait, that person shouted in a low voice. It's me. The old man lying on Zhu Fei's back recognized the newcomer's identity and quickly said to Zhu Fei, It's Larry. Zhu Fei took a closer look and couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice, State Preceptor, what happened to you? Larry's appearance was extremely miserable. He dragged half of his body and leaned against the wall of the alley. It was as if all the strength in his body had been drained. He panted heavily and his whole body was trembling. Larry, the gray-haired old man asked in surprise, What happened to you? Master, we've run into a tough nut. Larry spat blood on the ground and shook his head at the two with a pale face. That Crown Prince Lien has activated half of Dragon Flame City's defensive array. We can't teleport out smoothly at all in the array. Chapter 5090. Right now, the streets and alleys outside are also filled with traps. You don't know if there will be a test glyph array when you walk out. Whenever we pass through a test glyph array, the glyph array will make a sound. After saying this, Grand Tutor Larry seemed to have lost his strength. He leaned against the wall and panted heavily. I was injured by that Crown Prince Lien. I'm afraid we won't be able to leave this place alive. Grand Tutor Larry couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. Did Lily's plan completely fail? Completely failed. Grand Tutor Larry closed his eyes in pain. He had poured a lot of effort into this plan and cultivated two of the most excellent Lily heirs. He felt that it was already the pinnacle of his work. However, a fake was still a fake. Once she was in front of a real person, she immediately lost her meaning. I've already done my best. Grand Tutor Larry sighed. I know. The gray-haired old man sighed and thought to himself, life is so helpless. Sometimes you won't succeed even if you try your best. Just like him, he had failed once more than 10 years ago. Now, 10 years later, he was facing another failure. This was probably the last failure in his life. The old man thought to himself with a bitter laugh. A person who was about to die had a very sharp intuition. Over there, the test glyph array reacted. A shout came from outside the alley. Everyone's expression changed. Master, go. Larry clutched the wound on his chest and hurriedly pushed Zhu Fei in front of him. Take Master away. Zhu Fei could only take one person away and only had the strength to take one person away. However, since they had worked together for so long, they couldn't just watch Grand Imperial Tutor Larry die. Zhu Fei immediately threw out a teleportation glyph array from his sleeve. Go. No, the teleportation glyph array is gone. It's useless. Grand Tutor Larry still wanted to explain, but he was already dragged into the teleportation glyph array by Zhu Fei. Grand Tutor Larry's expression suddenly became very interesting. I already said it's useless, brother. Why didn't you let me finish my words? I originally had a chance to escape, but now Grandmaster Larry let out a long sigh at Zhu Fei as if there was nothing he could do. Could it be that this was the will of the heavens? Now that things had come to this point, there was no turning back. Zhu Fei didn't know what was going on, but he was delighted. He stepped out of the array with his master on his back and said, State Preceptor, look, you can teleport. Grand Preceptor Larry pointed forward expressionlessly as if all his strength had been sucked out. He didn't want to say another word. Zhu Fei didn't know what was going on, so he turned his head to take a look, and then his eyes widened in shock. He saw that there were about 10,000 soldiers and horses lined up neatly in front of the city gate. An outstanding man with black hair and a pair of slightly raised phoenix eyes was sitting astride a horse. He held the reins in his hand and looked at them expressionlessly. Waiting for the rabbit by a tree stump, you really did manage to find the rabbit. Prince Mo curled his lips and nodded in satisfaction. He raised his left hand and moved two of his fingers. Take him down. Zhu Fei hurriedly helped the gray-haired old man to the ground. He gripped the long sword in his hand and circled around his master, looking like he was about to fight to the death. Chapter 5091. The gray-haired old man reached out to pull him back and heaved a long sigh. No need to risk your life. It was useless. His Highness, the Crown Prince of the Divine Province, was waiting for him here with thousands of troops. The old man raised his hands and stretched them forward. He said arrogantly, It's fine if you want this king to surrender, but this king wants to see your father. This king wants to discuss everything with your father face to face. Prince Mo's eyes narrowed dangerously. He stared at the old man in front of him with a sneer. You don't have the right to negotiate with me. Before I meet the emperor, I want to settle the score with you about Liliere. The crown prince's handsome face was cold as he spat out these words in a flat tone. Take him down. With a cold expression, he waved his hand. Immediately, a dozen or so guards with quick movements rushed forward and pressed the spears in their hands against the chests of King Doro, Grand State Preceptor Larry, and Zhu Fei. Zhu Fei's expression turned cold. Just as he was about to resist, the old man reached out and pressed him down. This King Doro, even in the face of a life-and-death situation, his expression still didn't change. What do you want to settle with this king? Lily Air did develop a directional transformative liquid based on your crown princess. But in fact, this plan didn't succeed. You didn't lose anything. Emolian couldn't help but laugh. However, those who were familiar with him could see the true emotions in his heart from his cold phoenix eyes. Lily Air's plan didn't succeed. Didn't succeed mean it didn't annoy him? Didn't succeed mean it didn't exist? These people's strange thoughts and strange words were always so funny. I heard that the entire plan was carried out by your Grand State Preceptor Larry, right? Larry dragged his broken body and moved forward 2 steps like a turtle. He stood in front of King Doro and said, Lily Air's plan was indeed planned by Larry alone. It was I who suggested to the great King Doro to use your crown princess. Grand State Preceptor Larry stood in front of the gray-haired old man and shouted passionately, Using your love for your wife, they want to start with you. Grandmaster Larry shouted angrily, As long as we kidnap your wife secretly, you will be bound, at least for a short period of time. Before he could finish his words, he was stabbed in the body by a few guards. Deflated, he fell to the ground, his entire body wilting. At this moment, Prince Immerse smiled. This guy was born handsome, and when he smiled now, it was as bright as the moon in the sky. It was as if the entire world was shining because of him. That pair of phoenix eyes, however, did not contain the slightest bit of warmth from beginning to end, remaining incomparably cold from beginning to end. I remember that there are many tortures in the Nether Continent. One of them is called Chariot Crack. It's quite interesting. Tie the heads and limbs of those disloyal, heartless, and unjust people to 5 different cars and use large hyenas to pull the cars. Pull them in different directions. Every time the Crown Prince spoke, the color on Grand State Preceptor Larry's face faded a little, until the Crown Prince said, What do you think the process of being pulled by the Chariot Crack will be? Everyone present couldn't help but shudder. Grand State Preceptor Larry's face was filled with fright. He raised his voice and screamed, You have no right to do this. This preceptor wants to see His Majesty. Wants to see ya. His arms were firmly held down by several guards. Chapter 5092. His knees were heavily kicked by one of the guards, causing his body to uncontrollably kneel on the ground. His arms were pinned behind his back and pulled up high. What are you doing? A trace of fear slid through Grand State Preceptor Larry's heart. The Crown Prince in front of him was simply a lunatic. A lunatic. How could he treat a prisoner of war like this? Was it appropriate? Prince Immerse looked coldly at Grand State Preceptor Larry, who was kneeling at his feet, pausing between each word, his voice incomparably cold. I want the whole world to know. What will happen to those who conspire to murder my wife? You will become the center of attention. After saying this, he didn't say anything else, only slightly lifting his chin at his 2 trusted shadow guards. The 2 shadow guards immediately flashed forward. One of them effortlessly pulled Grand State Preceptor Larry up and dragged him forward. Let go of me, let go. Grand State Preceptor Larry's heart was filled with fear and dread. He was scared, truly scared. He didn't want to deal with a lunatic anymore, and he didn't want to provoke a lunatic anymore. This Crown Prince must be sick. The Crown Princess clearly wasn't harmed at all. Why did he? What are you doing? Stop. King Doro's expression changed greatly. He originally wanted to take a few steps forward, but he was abruptly stopped by a whip. When he looked up, he saw Crown Prince Immerse condescendingly looking down at him with a horsewhip in his hand. His icy gaze was filled with a ruthless glint. Our whip doesn't have eyes. If you take another step forward, we'll make your blood splatter on the spot. You. King Doro angrily pointed at him, unable to suppress the churning blood in his chest. You have no respect for your elders. If elders are always like you, coming back every few days to annoy people, then I don't need such elders. King Doro's eyes widened in astonishment, his voice trembling as he asked in shock, What do you mean? You? This Crown Prince actually knew his true identity? You think that after so many years, No one knows which corner you've been holed up in to preserve your strength. The crown prince looked at him with a face full of mockery and said coldly, His Majesty found out about your whereabouts 3 years ago. He's been waiting for you to make your move. You really didn't disappoint. After 18 years, you've made a comeback. King Feline, Grand Imperial Uncle. Remember who your captors are. He was the only crown prince on the Divine Land. He's your nephew, Emolien. Your Highness, Your Highness, Your Highness. A sea of cheers instantly drowned out King Feline and the others. His Highness the Crown Prince will send the traitor King Feline's subordinate, Larry. The car split up at the intersection of East Street. They pulled for about half an incense stick's worth of time. Larry's limbs fell off first, and then his head. Li Yi reported the entire incident. Although her description was very vague, when she reported, the little crown princess was picking up a meatball. After she finished speaking, the meatball fell on the table and rolled around. The little crown princess immediately lost her appetite. She hurriedly threw away her chopsticks and sat upright. The White Queen hastily waved her hand and said, Don't say these things that spoil one's appetite when eating. All right, you're dismissed. Yes, this subordinate will take her leave. Li Yi leaped and fled. Daughter-in-law, don't be scared. Little glutinous dumpling will only go crazy when he's angry. He's not normally like this to other people. The little stoic nodded. Chapter 5093. There had to be a reason why her husband treated Larry like this, and it was most likely related to her. She didn't know how that Larry courted disaster in front of her husband. He probably said something that provoked her husband, causing him to issue this kind of order. But no matter what, she supported her husband's decision. The little stoic rubbed her stomach and glanced at the dark sky outside. She pursed her lips and muttered softly, It's already dark. Why hasn't husband returned yet? Empress Bai looked at her with a smile. Since they captured King Feline and his subordinates, that child probably went to the study to find his father. Perhaps the two of them will interrogate those people overnight. The Empress had just said this when a eunuch came in to report. As the Empress expected, the father and son pair had casually settled their stuttering in the study and were now going to the Supreme Court to visit King Feline. Arbor puffed up his cheeks. Royal Mother, then I'll go back first. That's good too. I'll send someone to escort you back to the Eastern Palace. Who knows how long little glutinous dumpling's interrogation will last. Don't wait for him and go rest early. Arbor nodded. Before he left, he seemed to have thought of something and suddenly asked, Then has Consort Grand Fong been rescued? Empress Bai couldn't help but be speechless. If her daughter-in-law hadn't mentioned it, she would have forgotten about Consort Grand Fong again. To Bai Wuxia, it was already considered very difficult for her to remember 1 or 2 out of 10 of the royal concubines left behind by the previous emperor in the harem. She usually didn't take their matters to heart. Consort Grand Fong was a good-natured person and was usually very well behaved. She didn't have much of a presence, so it was normal for Bai Wuxia to forget her. This Consort Grand Fong could be considered one of the rare ones who didn't cause trouble among the previous emperor's many royal concubines. Since she was tactful, Empress Bai naturally didn't mind providing for this Consort Grand Fong. The entire harem of the Divine Province was empty. Apart from the previous emperor's old concubines, who might pinch each other for no reason, there really wasn't much else. Since all the renegades have been captured, Consort Grand Fong should also have been rescued, right? Hearing the little crown princess's question, the empress said uncertainly. Then she smiled and said, Little glutinous dumpling and his father will solve these problems. Jojo, don't think about those troublesome things now. The White Empress took a white fox fur cloak and tied it around her daughter-in-law. Nyangqin will send you there. No need, it's not that far. I'll take the carriage back. It's quite fast. It's cold outside. Be careful on the road. The Empress said and turned to Jinju, send the crown princess back. Jinju hurriedly bowed her head and answered. She knew in her heart how much her master valued this little crown princess. After bidding farewell to the Empress, Jinju welcomed the little crown princess out of the door and sat in the carriage that had already been arranged. Xiaomu leaned against the sturdy cushion and hugged a small, warm hand warmer. She nodded her small head from time to time, feeling drowsy. Jojo's Lien even said that he would come back to eat dinner with her, but he was nowhere to be seen at this time. He really didn't do things reliably. He was about to become a father, yet he was still so careless when handling matters. The carriage paused slightly, and Arbor's large head bumped into the carriage. Fortunately, the four walls of the carriage were padded very thickly with soft cotton wool. Arbor's bump didn't hurt much, and it even woke her up a bit from her drowsiness. The little stoic rubbed her eyes and sat upright. Chapter 5094. Pearl, what's the matter? I don't know why the wheel seems to be stuck on something. There was a trace of anxiety in Pearl's voice. Oh, it's okay. Arbor yawned with an indifferent expression. He raised his hand to open the curtain and looked out the window. If it takes too long to fix, then we won't wait for it. She might as well stick a flying talisman and fly back. Anyway, it was not far from the Eastern Palace. She took the carriage because she was lazy and didn't want to move her legs. This person is too careless. He didn't even see such a big iron rod and let it lie here. It's stuck in the wheel. Crown Princess, please wait a moment. Pearl angrily said a few words. She turned around and said to the servants behind her, "Hurry up. Don't let the Crown Princess wait for too long." The young Crown Princess looked out the window for a while. Her eyes narrowed, and her deep gaze fell on the eaves not far away. "All of you get down," Arbor suddenly shouted. Pearl and the others almost reflexively obeyed the young Crown Princess' order and fell to the ground. At the same time, a rain of arrows came from above the eaves and landed on the carriage with tinkling sounds. The carriage's exterior looked very ordinary, but in reality, it had been reinforced with heaven-grade refining materials. Therefore, the rain of arrows looked fierce, but in fact, it couldn't even penetrate the outer layer of defense. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A few black figures suddenly jumped down from the palace wall and rushed forward a few steps without saying a word. Just as they were about to surround the young crown prince consort, they drew their swords and sabers and began to beat her up. Pearl angrily whistled a loud and clear whistle, and then a cluster of fireworks in the dark night was lit up. Footsteps could be heard coming from all directions. The hidden guards who had been hiding in the dark rushed over when they heard the news. Without saying a word, they went forward to intercept these people in a well-trained manner. Soon, the two sides were engaged in a heated battle. The young crown prince consort lifted the curtain of the carriage and sat there expressionlessly. Even though her drowsiness had vanished without a trace, her spirit wasn't very good, and a hint of drowsiness rose from her heart. However, these idiots who came out of nowhere actually disturbed her when she went home to rest and secretly waited for her here. Dong! A black arrow was nailed to the window of her car. It didn't break through her defense, but made a deep hole in the curtain. The little stoic glanced at her, and her entire face turned a bit unsightly. The place where the arrow pierced was a pitch-black lotus. Of all places, it had to be Jojo's lotus. A bunch of fools who were tired of living. Let's see how I'll deal with them. It's been 18 years since we last met. You've aged a lot. The first thing the great emperor said when they met was a stab to the heart. The gray-haired old man glared angrily at the man in front of him with his dead fish eyes. For a moment, his heart was filled with emotions. It had been 18 years since they last met. The great emperor was still young and handsome, but he was aging step by step. This caused him to feel resentful and unwilling at the same time. He really didn't understand how he was inferior to this younger brother of his. Back then, when the previous empress was still alive, she also praised him repeatedly. Many times, he felt that he actually didn't do worse than her. However, the applause and encouragement always belonged to him and were completely cut off from him. What do you want to know? Prince Fuline sneered. If you want to learn about the heavenly fortune from me? Don't waste your time. Looking at the situation, if I didn't catch up during the day, I'll catch up at night. I've been working overtime this week. I'm going to be busy. Night. Chapter 5095. The main hall of the Supreme Court's dungeon was brightly lit. 2 rows of armed guards stood neatly on both sides of the door, looking straight ahead. In the middle of the circular hall, There was a spacious iron cage that could accommodate 100 people. King Feline sat cross-legged on a tricolored round felt, glaring angrily at Mo Lusheng and his son. This damned father and son, sinister and cunning, extremely shrewd and scheming. Only now did he understand that this Mo Lusheng, from the very beginning, had been playing with him like a monkey. He clearly knew that he was hiding in the Pingjin grassland 3 years ago, but had not done anything to him, only secretly monitoring him, allowing him to grow stronger, allowing his forces to spring up like bamboo shoots after the rain, expanding, expanding, and expanding. Just when he thought that with his current forces, he could make a comeback and had some chance of winning against Mo Lusheng, reality gave him a heavy slap in the face, slapping him back to his original state. You can kill me or cut me up as you wish. King Feline sneered, slightly raising his head. But if you want to find out about the heavenly fate from me, I advise you not to waste your efforts. Mo Lusheng stared indifferently at the gray-haired man in front of him for a long time, not saying anything, just shaking his head slightly. This attitude and expression of disdain to speak to him immediately infuriated King Feline Mo Lusheng. His eyes suddenly widened, glaring angrily at the great emperor. If you have something to say, just say it. What are you hemming and hawing for? I have nothing to say. Mo Lusheng glanced at him indifferently. The latter was so angry that he directly jumped up from the round felt, pouncing on the big iron cage, slamming the iron door across the cage. Mo Lusheng, you must think I'm very funny, right? For so many years, I've schemed this and that, but in the end, it's all within your plan. 3 years ago, you saw through my identity, but kept it a secret, hiding it, waiting for me to walk into your trap. Ha ha ha! King Feline scolded angrily. You're probably thinking, how can there be such a stupid brother like me in this world? Mo Lusheng shook his head and calmly told him, you're wrong. More than 10 years ago, you started a rebellion in the capital for your own selfish reasons, and your name was removed from the Mo family's genealogy. The current eldest son's name is Big Brother Mo Lufeng. Mo Lusheng's expression was indifferent. You're nothing, so don't call yourself my brother. Mo Luzhu gritted his teeth. You removed my name. It's you. What right do you have to remove my name from the genealogy? You greedy thing. You just don't want me to have a good time. Just who is it that has the ambition of a wolf and still refuses to give up? Mo Lusheng was simply angered to the point of laughing. Who was it that started that war 18 years ago, causing the people to have no way of making a living and leaving so many people homeless? Who was it that instigated these strange changes and forced everyone to come to the capital? And who was it that gathered 300 experts and surrounded Zhen and Wuxia in the middle of the night? In that battle, the couple won in the end, but he also paid a very painful price. He racked his brains to repair Wuxia bit by bit, and waited for him for 17 or 18 years until he was dizzy. At that time, he was simply mentally and physically exhausted. Because he had just ascended the throne, there were many things to worry about. Chapter 5096. At that time, he had to spend a lot of effort to treat Wuxia and also clean up the mess that Mo Lusheng had made. Later, for his son's safety, he had to send little glutinous rice ball away. The happy family of 3 suddenly became his lonesome self. For all those years, he had to endure the loneliness and coldness, endure the bitterness and pain in the dead of night. After enduring the hardships, his temperament had changed greatly. He was usually moody, and when his head hurt, he only wanted to kill people. He wanted to kill all the people in this world with bad intentions. Fortunately, everything returned to the beginning. Little glutinous rice ball was brought back, and Wuxia also came back. Sometimes this feeling was so good that it was almost unreal, making him feel like he was in a dream. Did he hate King Feline? Of course, he hated him to the bone. Back then, if this person had not been ambitious and conspired with the rebel forces to ignite the flames of war, perhaps he would not have had to endure the pain of being separated from his wife and son for decades. If Mo Lusheng heard his father's silent criticism in his heart, he would most likely not be happy. Back then, if his father had not been wise enough to send him to the lower star domain, he might not have met his wife. Therefore, everything in this world was fated to exist by the will of the heavens. He and his dear little wife were destined to be married, and no one could tear apart that line of marriage. Father, Mo Yin reached out and poked her father's sleeve. Her father stopped talking halfway and just stared at King Fu Lin in front of him, not saying a word or getting angry. This was not quite right. Mo Lusheng came back to his senses and looked coldly at Mo Yoshi across the large iron cage. The current you is completely unable to be my opponent. Mo Yoshi was abnormally cold and angry. He gripped the iron cage tightly and pounded on the two iron pillars with extremely narrow gaps. He roared, "Do you think you've won? Mo Lusheng, you never know what I will do next. I left you a generous gift on East and West 12th Street. Ha ha, you're just too confident in yourself. That's why you've been defeated in front of me again and again." Dong dong dong. Mo Lien threw a pitch-black ball at Mo Liu's feet. King Feline, no, you've already been removed from the Mo clan. Now that you call yourself King Duo Luo, it's more appropriate to call you King Duo Luo. King Feline Mo Liu's eyes were wide open, glaring at Mo Lien and gnashing his teeth. This junior actually dared to provoke him in front of him, reminding him once again that he had been expelled from the Mo clan. Damn little brat, he's really tired of living. Why are you glaring at me? King Duo Luo, why don't you take a look at what's beneath your feet? You think you can scare this old man with a random firearm? Mo Liuja was halfway through his sentence when he suddenly heard the word firearm and regained his senses. He lowered his head and looked at the black ball rolling at his feet. He slowly squatted down and picked it up with trembling hands. Even his voice was trembling slightly. How did you find it? Mo Lien looked at him as if he was an idiot. You still don't get it? Someone beside you betrayed you. East and West 12th Street. All the firearms you sent people to bury. The distribution map is in our hands. Is it that hard to find it? We found it all in 6 hours. Mo Lien looked at him in amusement. You can recognize the reality now. When you stepped into the Supreme Court's prison, you've already announced your complete failure. Chapter 5097. Zhu Fei. It's Zhu Fei. It's him, he betrayed me. King Fulin slammed the iron door in agitation, his entire person on the verge of madness. It was Zhu Fei. It was Zhu Fei who betrayed him. He really didn't expect that the person he had saved and cultivated until now, the person he had planned to take as his godson, who had accompanied him to the end, would be the one who betrayed him the most. How ridiculous. The emperor expressionlessly watched him go crazy for a while before insincerely persuading him, "Don't go crazy anymore. Things have already come to this. I have nothing to say to you. I only have one sentence to say to you." The emperor continued to prick his heart, speaking the truth. Compared to 18 years ago, you are not ruthless enough, have insufficient means, have insufficient connections, and are not powerful enough. You have regressed a lot, which is why I don't want to act against you. If you're willing to stay on the Pingjin Prairie and retire for the rest of your life, I probably won't care about you. Mo Yin, he felt that his father's attitude and tone were really the kind of infuriating. How could he have such a father? This was too deceitful. It's a pity that you foolishly left the Pingjin Prairie and came to Dragon Flame City. The emperor said with emotion, if it was more than 10 years ago, you definitely wouldn't trust someone so much. Before you do anything, you would always leave something behind. What does this mean? It means that you have been suppressed by me for more than 10 years. After you fell, you never got up again. There is no one around you that you can use. You can only seek help from the heavenly fate, seek some unrealistic help. You lost miserably. After Mo Yin said this, Mo Yin saw that King Doro, that miserable guy, was so angered by his father that he spat out a mouthful of blood on the iron cage. Mo Lusheng looked back expressionlessly. Lord Wang of the Supreme Court, who was more than 50 years old, hurriedly wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and walked forward. What are you still standing there for? Hurry and clean up the iron cage." Looking at His Majesty and His Highness the Crown Prince's pair of disdainful eyes, they must be disgusted that Prince Duo Luo had spat out a mouthful of old blood on the iron cage, which was so dirty that it stung their eyes. As an old official for more than 10 years, he naturally knew a lot about the rebellion of King Fulin more than 10 years ago. Now, seeing the imprisoned Prince Fulin being angered to the point of vomiting blood by His Majesty at home, he was really speechless. Therefore, don't say that His Highness the Crown Prince was a scammer. In fact, this was probably just a son inheriting his father's work and inheriting His Majesty's scammer attribute. Great Emperor waved his hand. Let King Duo Luo be alone for a while. After taking a few steps, he suddenly turned around and looked at King Fulin, who was sitting on the ground through the iron cage. "Oh yes, I heard that when you were in the Pingjin Prairie, you lived a luxurious life. Recently, our Dragon Flame City has been spending a lot of money. We've spent too much on digging defense canals and building fortifications. In our Supreme Court's dungeon, I'm afraid you won't be treated that well." Great Emperor left after saying this. But who was the Supreme Court's Chancellor? He immediately understood the meaning of Great Emperor's words. Great Emperor hadn't walked far with his son when he heard Lord Wang of the Supreme Court roaring at his subordinates. "What are you still standing there for? Escort the criminal out and send him to the water dungeon below." Clang! He kicked over the food box in front of the iron cage. Does a criminal need to eat so much? Eat according to the criminal's standards every day. Chapter 5098. If His Majesty didn't want Prince Fulin to have a good life, who could save that guy? But from His Majesty's intentions, it didn't seem like he wanted Prince Fulin to die immediately. So the propriety in this matter would have to be linked to Lord Wang's actual skill level, who knew if it was because he saw Prince Duoyuo's wretched appearance. But Imo Luxing felt that his current mood was super good. When he glanced at his troublesome son beside him, he actually said to his son very amiably, "We didn't eat enough for dinner just now, right? Let's go back and have supper with Dad." "No." Prince Imo very decisively and bluntly rejected his father. "Wife must be very unhappy that you didn't eat dinner with her. Supper. Supper is here." A black figure very nimbly flew to the crown prince and bowed. "Go eat with His Majesty." It wasn't like he was a lonely old man who was always empty and lonely, intentionally or unintentionally wanting to disturb his son's happy life. His son also had a wife. He had been freaking busy all day today, so it wasn't too much to have supper with his wife in his spare time, right? This old man really didn't have any eyes, and he still wanted to drag his son to supper. What was this? They all had their own wives and were living their own lives peacefully. Wouldn't that be great? Imo Luxing didn't know that his son was ridiculing him in his heart. Right now, he was staring dumbfoundedly at the shadow guard who suddenly appeared in front of him. "Go accompany His Majesty." Imo Yin waved her hand, more or less shooing away a fly. Imo Luxing felt that he was being disdained by his son and inexplicably felt a little sullen in his heart. This child was really becoming more and more crooked and out of shape as he grew up. He was such a cute child when he was young, hugging his father's thigh and drooling when he saw the world. How could he grow so crooked? It was most likely his adoptive father's fault. How did he educate his child? A good child was completely led astray by his adoptive father. "Greetings, Your Majesty." The two left the Supreme Court's dungeon and met a monk not far outside the door. His large, shiny forehead was very conspicuous in the dark night, radiating light. When Imo Luxing saw the head of the person who came, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. He coughed lightly and said, "Great Elder Kong Yin, what business do you have with us?" "Your Majesty, Your Highness the Crown Prince." Great Elder Kong Yin stepped forward with a serious expression and bowed to the two. Then he hesitated for a moment and said, "This old monk wants to visit King Fulin in the dungeon." Imo Luxing glanced at him. This guy kept calling him old monk, which made him feel uncomfortable. He really did become a monk. "It's not impossible for you to visit him." Imo Luxing's expression was indifferent as he nodded his head. "It's just that we're not killing this person right now. Not because we have any kind intentions of repaying evil with good. Instead, he is waiting. Let's wait and see if there are any fish that slipped through the net and got caught together. Let's wait and see if Tian Yun's people will do anything about it. Other than that, it was just as he had said. He had no good intentions towards his person, and he had no brotherly feelings towards him. There was only the desire for vengeance. Kong Yi nodded solemnly. Yes, this old monk is not here to influence your majesty's decision. This old monk came today to pass on a message to the late King Feline's heir. Mo Lushing nodded. Go on. He looked at Great Elder Kong Yin's back as he turned and entered the Supreme Court's dungeon, remaining silent. Chapter 5099. His brotherly love for Mo Luju had long been obliterated 18 years ago. During those turbulent years, if not for the support of Prince Kong and King Jinyuan, he most likely would not have been able to hold on. Mo Luju was not worthy of the word brother at all. The great emperor withdrew his gaze from Great Elder Kong Yin, saying coldly in his heart, he will never forgive this person. He and Wuxia had missed so many years of each other's time, and he had lived alone for so many years. These things were not something that a simple word of forgiveness could completely cover up. The father and son silently walked down the long steps, one in front and one behind, walking under the silent moonlight. Their figures were drawn out by the faint moonlight. Bang! In the dark night, a cluster of burning fireworks suddenly lit up the entire moonlit night. Mo Lushing subconsciously looked up. Under the faint moonlight, a colorful firework suddenly lit up the entire night sky. The great emperor's eyes narrowed slightly. There's a situation. I'll go over and take a look. Mo Yin was secretly shocked. Looking at the direction, it seemed to be heading towards the Eastern Palace. Could it be? He suddenly had a bad premonition. After saying that, he called out Little Seven and rushed towards the direction of the burning firework. Mo Lushing speechlessly looked at his son's huge formation, summoning the golden dragon flight, and could not help but shake his head, muttering to himself, not calm at all. His son was good at everything, outstanding in every aspect, but when it came to the matter of his wife, he was so irritable that it was as if he was a different person. What calm in front of a landslide, turning into ashes while chatting and laughing? That was because he did not meet his wife. Once he met her, he could not be calm at all. What calm, steady, wise, and intelligent. The moment something happened to his wife, all of that was thrown out of his mind. Mo Yoshing's eyes swept a slightly disdainful glance at his son's back, muttering to himself, what a disappointing fellow. Per was really anxious now. She had been ordered by the Empress to send the crown princess back to the main hall of the Eastern Palace safe and sound. Who would have thought that on the way they would meet some blind people who came to assassinate the crown princess? The most frightening thing was that the crown princess, who had been sitting in the carriage watching the commotion, suddenly moved. With a leap, he jumped into the group of black-clothed assassins. A long sword suddenly appeared in his hand. Without saying a word, he slashed at the neck of one of the black-clothed assassins. How dare you prick Jojo's lotus? Bastard! Each and every one of them was tired of living and rushed to Qiao to look for trouble. Die! The little stoic attacked, ruthlessly. It was fine if she didn't attack, but once she did, everyone was shocked. With a flip of his wrist, the lightning shadow flickered and formed into electric flowers that crackled and fell among the group of black-clothed men. If the little crown princess sits in the carriage and does not move, there will be a group of guards to protect her. But now, she jumped into the group of assassins all by herself. With this move, more than a dozen sharp blades simultaneously slashed at her. Pearl was so anxious that her forehead was drenched in sweat. She shouted harshly, "You little thieves, you dare!" These people were truly desperados who didn't care about their own lives. How did they suddenly emerge from the imperial palace? There is only one way for so many people to avoid the dozen or so rounds of patrols in the imperial palace. They were probably hidden in some space container and secretly brought into the imperial palace. Chapter 5100. The problem lies with the person who brought them in. In these 2 days, there are not many people who were summoned into the palace by His Majesty and Her Majesty. If we investigate carefully, we will be able to find out who is causing trouble. Pearl said coldly, "Since you are all here, then stay in the palace forever." Pearl raised her hand, and the sound of clothes fluttering flashed in the night sky. More than 10 vigorous and fierce shadow guards joined the battle and rushed toward the assassins without saying a word. After a few rounds, the group of assassins, who were originally tied into a rope, was scattered. The shadow guards cooperated well with each other and separated the assassins one by one in groups of 3 to 5. The numerous assassins that had surrounded Xiao Mu were instantly dispersed by quite a bit. When they wanted to gather again, they were separated by small groups and could no longer gather in one place. Arbor's thunder flash gathered a bolt of lightning and waved it toward the assassin in front of him. At the same time, that assassin's figure leaned back slightly, and he bent his waist like a cat as he twisted his body. He took out a spiritual energy bead between his fingers and abruptly threw it at Xiao Mu. Seeing this scene, Pearl's heart almost jumped out of her chest. The Empress entrusted the crown princess to her to escort back, and now the little crown princess was going to be injured in front of her. She didn't expect that she couldn't complete such a simple task given to her by the Empress. Pearl was vexed, but she was also very angry. She watched as the spiritual energy bead was thrown at the little crown princess at such a close distance. She was so far away that she didn't even have the ability to stop it. However, the expected explosion didn't happen. Even the spiritual energy bead didn't even make a splash. Everyone was a little stunned, especially Pearl. She hurriedly looked away and looked at Arbor and the assassin in black with a stunned expression. She saw the little crown princess expressionlessly looking at the assassin, who was also stunned, and shouted, "Idiot! Do you know why your spiritual power bead didn't explode in front of me?" The assassin shook his head in a very comical manner. Then, he wondered if he was acting a little silly. He could clearly be aloof and refuse to answer the young crown prince consort question, allowing her to perform this one-man show. However, he subconsciously wanted to answer her. "Because you're stupid," the little crown princess shouted, and then waved her hand. Everyone saw 4 or 5 similar round objects flying towards the black-clothed assassin. He didn't even have the time to call out before he was caught in the blast of the spiritual energy orb's explosion. The unlucky assassin was sent flying by a wave of air and landed heavily on the ground, unable to catch his breath for a long time. The thunderclap, sword in Arbor's hand, turned into thousands of phantoms and pierced into the assassin's body. Her bright eyes revealed a faint trace of coldness. After killing the black-clothed assassin, Arbor deliberately looked back, then suddenly turned around and flew up to the roof. This action immediately shocked Jinju and the others. Pearl couldn't help but blurt out, "Master, quickly come down." However, Xiao Mu turned a deaf ear to her. She merely looked down at her and gave her an indifferent nod to appease her. As soon as she turned around, Xiao Mu leaped up without warning and swiftly landed on the roof behind her. "Catch him alive!" a black-clothed assassin shouted, his eyes revealing a trace of excitement. Chapter 5101. Was this crown princess a fool? If she had obediently stayed in the carriage without moving, there would naturally be a group of shadow guards protecting her. They simply wouldn't have been able to get close to her so smoothly. But now, she had courted death by jumping into their encirclement. Even if they were all separated later on, they would still be able to get closer to the little crown princess in the midst of the chaos. As long as they caught this person at the first moment, then all the difficulties would certainly not be difficult. All the problems could be easily solved. The eyes of that black-clothed assassin flashed. He gritted his teeth and took a palm strike from the shadow guard. He quickly retreated a dozen steps back and borrowed the force to fly up the roof. After a few ups and downs, he chased in the direction of the crown princess' escape. Pearl couldn't help but become anxious when she saw this. She exclaimed, "Quickly chase," and hurriedly led all the shadow guards to jump up the eaves. Stepping on the roof tiles, they rapidly chased after the little crown princess. The group chased each other on the eaves for a long time, until the young crown prince Consort abruptly stopped. At that time, the bright moonlight was like a silver thread flowing through her hair. It was as if a layer of moon-white gauze was draped over this little person's body. It was so beautiful that it was like a dream. She stood on top of the corridor eaves of a palace, expressionlessly watching the black-clothed assassins who were trying their best to chase after her. A trace of mockery flashed through the bottom of her cold eyes. This King Duoluo was already in prison, yet he still made such a lousy move. Wasn't he underestimating her, Xiao Mu, too much by sending these people to capture her? Or could it be that this was actually just an assassination that was not well planned? King Doro most likely invited the disciple of heavenly fate to accompany him. In this way, the odds of success would certainly increase by a lot. But unfortunately, the disciple of heavenly fate had probably already seen through King Doro. He didn't have much value and didn't have much meaning, so he didn't participate in this operation. Let King Duoluo lead a group of small shrimps to jump around in the Empress inner court, or turn the sky and the earth upside down. In short, they wouldn't be able to cause any big waves. It was truly pitiful that even his allies had completely abandoned him. Xiao Mu's lips curled into a faint sneer as she indifferently stared at the many black-clothed assassins who were chasing after her. Those people's eyes flickered slightly. When they met Arbor's gaze, they subconsciously shrank back. A very disturbing feeling of fear rose from the bottom of his heart. Before they could even comprehend why they would feel such a negative emotion, they saw the young crown prince Consort smile expressionlessly at them. Yes, it was a very strange smile. It looked like a smile, but the expression on his face didn't change at all. Your biggest mistake was trying to gang up on me. Arbor glanced at them coldly. She was a vengeful person. If anyone wanted to gang up on her, she would gang up on them and beat them back. She wouldn't give them any face at all. After saying that, Arbor called out with a stoic face, "Big Green, Big Ape, Little Snow, go!" Following the three roars, the group of black-clothed assassins who were on guard revealed astonishment in their eyes. Suddenly seeing a blue wand flying into the air and waving a water spirit down without saying anything, to be honest, they were somewhat resistant in their hearts. If you want to fight, then fight. What's the meaning of summoning your beast? Do you think we don't have a beast with us? What a joke. Chapter 5102. Everyone was basically a spiritual cultivator or divine cultivator. Which one of them didn't prepare a ferocious beast in their spirit beast space? How comical. It was just a competition of beasts. Who didn't have a beast? A black-clothed assassin gave his companions a meaningful look and summoned his spirit beast with a cold expression. However, the instant he summoned his spirit beast, he saw a furry black gorilla run over and jump over. It raised its fan-sized palm and sent his spirit beast flying 8,000 kilometers with a slap. His enormous spirit beast was sent flying from one eave to the other. Its heavy body smashed through the roof and fell into the hole, causing a series of ear-piercing screams to ring out. There seemed to be royal maids living in that room. The heavens really took pity on them. They should have been frightened to death, the little stoic thought. It was all that hideous spirit beast's fault. It was really strong and actually smashed through the entire roof when it fell down. That hidden guard whose spiritual beast had been slapped flying only felt a tearing pain assail his divine conscience in the dark, and he involuntarily spat out a mouthful of blood. He gazed at Xiao Mu in horror before collapsing down the eaves. No one helped him up. His companions were also too busy fending for themselves, so how could they have the leisure to help him up? That hidden guard fell down and landed heavily on the ground, kicking up a faint cloud of dust. Arbor glanced at him coldly before retracting his gaze. Qingluan, the great ape, and the snow leopard dashed forward together, biting and tearing at people on sight. They could also send 2 to 3 black-clothed assassins flying down the eaves with a swipe of their claws. People constantly summoned their spirit beasts out of their spirit beasts in a panic. However, they quickly discovered that the 3 spirit beasts summoned by the little crown princess were simply abnormally brave. Their spirit beasts were practically incomparable in front of them. The moment the two of them met face to face, they were defeated in a matter of minutes. "Attack!" The little stoic shouted expressionlessly. Don't look at the fat body of the gorilla. It seemed to be fat from head to toe, but the speed at which it moved made even Qing Luan gasp in surprise. The gorilla sent an assassin hiding under the eaves, flying with a single punch. He screamed miserably as he fell from the roof to the ground, sprawling on his back. Something even more ridiculous had happened. The gorilla jumped down from the roof and sat on his stomach as he screamed in horror. How could the black-clothed assassin possibly withstand the impact and strength of this attack? Immediately, he spat out a mouthful of blood from his internal organs and fell to the ground in a daze. It seemed that he was about to die. Woof, 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 woof. 3 little puppies suddenly sprinted out of the star domain, surrounding a person who was fighting and retreating, dodging to the side of the winding corridor. Woof, woof, woof. The puppies suddenly bit onto the man's trousers and dug their hind paws into the ground. Scram! This person was already scared silly by the way his companions died one after another. When he saw the 3 little puppies also jump out to bully people, he was instantly enraged and kicked one of the puppies. He originally thought that this kick would take away half of that damn mutt's life, even if it didn't die. However, although his kick seemed to land on that soft puppy, it was actually like kicking an incomparably sturdy iron plate. Chapter 5103. With a crisp crack, his toe was actually fractured. This was simply the biggest joke in the world, all right? He had only kicked a small puppy the size of his palm, but in the end, he had fractured his bones. Where was justice? Where was justice? This was simply an oddity. This unlucky fellow simply didn't know why he ended up like this. He clearly only kicked a puppy, so how did he end up fracturing his toe? At this moment, one of the puppies was hanging onto Masta's skirt belt. It quickly climbed on her left shoulder and barked nonstop. "Speak human language," Arbor expressionlessly said. In her opinion, divine and holy beasts probably all had a bit of pride and didn't like to speak human language. Most of the time, they liked to communicate with her by gesticulating. What a weird communication method. Arbor internally ridiculed. "Masta!" The puppy rubbed against her head. Recovered. I can recover now." Arbor didn't really understand at first, but when he realized what the puppy was saying, his eyes couldn't help but brighten. "Then what are we waiting for?" Arbor pulled the puppy into his palm and forcefully rubbed its head. "Hurry and merge with us to recover your true form as a holy beast. I only need 3 drops of blood." Oh my God, this 3-headed dog could recover. This meant that he only needed to collect their blood to start refining the soul, returning Bodhi pill. In other words, Murong Sun's awakening was just around the corner. Arbor couldn't help but be a bit excited, so his tone also became a bit hurried. "What are you hesitating for? Hurry and merge." The puppy's expression was a bit unnatural. But the commotion when we merge will probably be very big. If we're not careful, we'll alarm everyone in the palace. It was already the middle of the night, so the effect wouldn't be too good when Arbor heard this. He couldn't help but blow his beard and glare. How big of a commotion can it be? I'll set up a soundproof barrier here. Hurry and merge. Sir Jojo was still a little excited. The transformation of the 3 puppies into Cerberus was a little magical. Seeing it with his own eyes would definitely be very magical. The cute little puppy looked at Arbor timidly and confirmed again, "My master. Why, you're sure? Wasn't that obvious?" Xiaomu glanced at the 3 puppies before nimbly patting their heads. He turned around and yelled at the little guy, "Hurry up and transform." "All right." The cute little puppy bounced twice and raised its little head. "Master Silver, stay a little further away from me. I'll be able to complete my transformation very soon." While speaking, the 3 palm-sized puppy heads gathered together, and their bodies were covered in a layer of moon-white light. In just a few seconds, they really fused together. At the same time that his body swelled up, his 3 heads also rose up, and he let out a long howl. However, the combined Cerberus movements were indeed too great. Arbor didn't expect this guy's body to grow several thousand times bigger after merging. At this moment, The green one and the great ape seemed very small in front of it. This guy was like a small, bulging hill as he squatted there. He was lofty and huge, tall and sturdy. When he raised his head, he let out a roar. Arbor wanted nothing more than to rush up and immediately cover his mouth with his hand. This guy's roar really woke up more than half of the people in the palace. I still need to catch up on my sleep tomorrow. I'm sleepy. Chapter 5104. Sir Jojo was speechless and raised his hand to slap it. However, the other party was squatting there like a small hill. If he wanted to slap it, he would have to leap up. It was truly too troublesome. Arbor expressionlessly stood in front of the Cerberus. Its petite figure formed an intense contrast with the blue-eyed Cerberus that stood in front of it. Pearl, who was standing nearby, was truly dumbfounded and couldn't immediately react. No wonder the little crown princess wasn't the slightest bit afraid when she was besieged. There wasn't even the slightest bit of worry on her face. Just think about it. To have such a super large beast protecting her. When Pearl thought of this, she suddenly shut her mouth silently. It seemed like the crown princess didn't just have one beast by her side. She summoned a gorilla, a divine beast Chingwan that flew in the air, and a snow leopard that ran extremely fast. The crown princess was probably the only person in the world who could summon 4 beasts at the same time. She truly worried for nothing just now. It was naturally impossible for a formidable figure like the crown princess to be injured by a few mediocre assassins. Pearl's heart relaxed, and only then did she realize that her back was drenched in cold sweat. When the night wind blew past, the sticky cold sweat made her back shiver, and she reflexively shivered. "Your Highness, His Highness is here," one of the hidden guards shouted, and everyone hastily turned around to look. Sure enough, they saw an ink-colored figure like a shooting star in the night, covering 1,000 miles with a single step. His speed was astonishing, and he arrived in front of them in the blink of an eye. The little stoic turned her body and deliberately aimed the back of her head at this swindler. Emo Lien's figure flashed, and he was already behind her. He was just about to raise his hand to hug his wife. Who knew that the little stoic would abruptly turn around and fling a purple immobilization talisman at his forehead with a smack. "Immobilize!" This fellow even shouted in a very appropriate manner. Emo Lien speechlessly twitched his mouth, and he shockingly discovered that his movements had actually paused for a second. Although it was only for a second, and outsiders couldn't see any clues at all, he himself could feel it. Fuck, my wife is going against the heavens. She was just a little level 7 god realm cultivator. The body securing talisman she made could actually freeze him for a second? Who would believe this? How could the grade of talismans be so strange? Those whose cultivation was 1 rank higher than the little stoics should be immune to all of the talismans she made. But now outsiders might not be aware of Emo Lien's slight delay, but as a talisman maker, Arbor could clearly sense it. The little stoic's eyes brightened, and she almost walked right into the trap. She stopped in her tracks and asked with a serious expression on her face, "Were you frozen just now?" Emo Lien nodded honestly. "Honey, I'm sorry." The man shamelessly took a few steps forward and reached out his arms to his wife. "I'm a big liar. I promised to have dinner with Jojo, but I broke my promise. You can scold me, or even hit me." "Humph." Sir Jojo harumphed heavily with a haughty expression. Emo Lien raised his hand with a grin and pulled the little stoic into his arms at once. He covered her small, cool hands and blew on them as he asked, "Were you frightened just now?" The little stoic raised her head. "How could I be frightened? Speaking of which, it should be those unlucky assassins who were frightened." Chapter 5105. After all, it was not a common sight to see 3 or 4 giant beasts chasing after them at the same time. The main reason was that they did not dare to summon their spirit beasts out of their space. After all, summoning their spirit beasts was not of much use. The other party had a 3-headed giant dog that was like a small hill. As long as it squatted there and barked at them, all the spirit beasts around it would obediently lie down, unable to muster any thoughts of resistance. This kind of pressure from a sacred beast was a complete suppression of one's spirit. It was not something that ordinary spirit beasts could withstand. Mo Yin lowered his head to check. Seeing that his little wife was safe and sound, he relaxed and smiled at her. Jojo, hubby will give you a kiss, and you will forgive hubby, all right? I thank your entire family. Arbor rolled her eyes at him and raised her small hand, directly blocking his face. This fellow was really becoming more and more unruly. In the middle of the night, with so many guards and palace maids around, he actually dared to be so impudent towards Lord Jojo. He deserved a beating. Mo Yin pursed his lips and pulled down her small hand to kiss it. His clear eyes were incomparably serious. It's getting late. We should go home and rest. It's not good to sleep late. You will be tired tomorrow, and it will affect baby Mo. Arbor thought so too. She glanced at the black-clothed assassins who had already been subdued and were half kneeling on the ground under the many shadow guards. There are spies in Mother's palace, the little crown princess said with a certain expression. Otherwise, how could it be so coincidental that she had just stepped out of the central palace and immediately encountered a large group of assassins on her way back? Should I use the dictum talisman to ask, or no need? Mo Yin saw that her expression was slightly tired and rubbed her small face with heartache. Look at how tired his wife was. Originally, she could have laid down to rest. These blind assassins were really hateful and shameless. Juju, this servant is here. Juju hurriedly stepped forward and bowed respectfully to Prince Mo. Bring all of them back to Mother for interrogation. Yes, Pearl had no objection to this. The Empress valued the young crown princess so much. Now that something like this had happened, she would definitely not let it go. She would definitely interrogate her overnight. Jinju hurriedly called a group of shadow guards to arrest the black-clothed assassins. Along the way, the assassins were beaten and cursed as they went to the Emperor's palace. Meanwhile, in the Supreme Court's underground prison, Great Elder Kongin silently stood on top of a high rock. Separated by water, he looked at the gray-haired old man locked inside with a stern expression. At this moment, King Duo Luo's gaze also fell on Great Elder Kongin. After a long while, he finally found his voice. Who would have thought that Great Elder Kongin would really enter Buddhism and become a monk? The number one figure of the Elder Hall actually took things too hard and decided to become a monk? How can a Mo Luxing endure this? Great Elder Kongin was silent for a long time. Her eyes were fixed on King Duo Luo, who was imprisoned in the water cage. This person's lower body to his waist was completely soaked in ice-cold water. His upper body was bare, and there were very obvious whip marks on his arms. Great Elder couldn't help but shake his head, asking in a faint voice, so persistent, is it really worth it? This King Fu Lin, if he didn't court death by scheming against something that he shouldn't have. This time, he should be surrounded by his children and grandchildren, a rich and idle prince. I'm not in good spirits. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. Chapter 5106. King Felin's wrinkled old face twisted slightly. With a sullen face, he suddenly rushed to the cage and slapped it hard, shouting, "Great Elder, did you come here today to see this prince make a fool of himself?" Great Elder Kong shook his head. If it weren't for the heir's dying instructions, this old monk wouldn't have come here. The heir had long expected that the prince would have such a day and had already instructed this old monk earlier. If Wang Yi is really imprisoned for conspiring against the law, let this old monk pass a message to Wang Yi. King Felin's old face twitched a few times. This prince doesn't want to hear it. The gray-haired old man slammed his palm on the cage. Sizzling electric currents slid through his body, causing his whole body to tremble uncontrollably. This son had never been of one mind with him. More than 10 years ago, people said that father and son soldiers were of one mind when going into battle. But what about him? As the crown prince of Felin, he only wished to live his life as a yes-man. He had no grand ambitions, no foresight, not even the slightest bit. It was simply a disgrace to him, King Felin. So for more than 10 years ago, He only pretended that he had never given birth to this son, leaving them to fend for themselves in a broken place like Seacombe Planet, and never thought of looking for them. The heir said that if the prince still remembers the trace of kinship, please let that child go. Don't ever look for him, and don't ever reveal his identity. Impossible. King Feline slammed his palm on the cage, ignoring the electric currents that flowed through his palm, roasting his skin and flesh. His dim old eyes stared fixedly at Kong Yin, coldly enunciating each word. That's my grandson. His father has no ambition, but there's still hope for him. He must inherit the mantle of King Fu Lin. As long as he is nurtured well, there's no hope. Great Elder Kong Yin coldly interrupted King Feline. This child was already a monk at birth, and it was personally shaved by the heir of King Feline. His mother was exhausted and worried all day long, and died during childbirth. Kong Yin said coldly, heir apparent has been worrying too much all year round, and his health has been deteriorating. So, less than a month after the child became a monk, he also passed away. King Feline slapped the cage heavily and said with a cold expression, this king will never admit it. What do you plan to do? Kong Yin's face turned cold, revealing a rare trace of anger. You're already in prison, and you still don't want to give up? You still want to nurture your own grandson and walk on a path of no return that is hard to predict? What right do you have to dictate other people's lives? Then what right do you have to control him? Have you ever asked him if he wants to shave his head and become a monk? Great Elder Kong Yin fell silent. Indeed, they had no right to speak on this matter. What do you want? I must see him, King Feline said coldly. Ever since he learned of this grandson's existence, he had people bring him back from Seacombe Planet. However, he was still one step behind. Kong Yin, that old bald donkey, took his grandson away first, and he had no choice but to have people chase him all the way, trying to snatch him back. The strangest thing was, he clearly knew that his grandson had been staying by the little crown princess's side, but his people had secretly gone to look for him several times, and every time they came up empty-handed. It was as if his whereabouts were somewhat elusive. Chapter 5107. The child's whereabouts had always been very elusive. Every time the secret guards reported, they would say that they saw the little Gongzi hovering in front of the crown princess for 2 hours, and then try to catch him, but he would disappear again. So he always had reason to suspect that the crown princess should have some kind of magical weapon that could take away his little grandson. Therefore, his men always missed their target and were unable to catch his grandson in the normal way. What will it take for you to stop? King Feline gloomily glared at Kong Yin. Blood ties can't be erased. He will always be my grandson. Kong Yin couldn't help sneering. You are really selfish. King Feline looked at him coldly. I was wondering why you didn't come to me. Sure enough, you can't keep your cool. If this old monk didn't come to you, you would have done everything possible to inform me to come, wouldn't you? King Feline sneered. Great Elder really knows me well. My request is very simple. If you're willing to get me out of this prison, absolutely impossible. That's a pity. King Feline glared at him fiercely. If you can make the decision to let me out of here, I can consider never acknowledging this grandson in this life. King Feline, it's really bad luck to be your son and grandson. No wonder your bastard sons and daughters are almost all dead these years. This was probably the most vicious sentence that Great Elder Kong Yin, who was a monk, had said in recent years. King Feline didn't care at all, just coldly staring at Great Elder Kong Yin. You have no children, what do you know? This prince is also fighting for them. Unfortunately, these people are too weak and don't have the fortune to enjoy it. In order to build his great cause over the years, he had sacrificed many children. He had never carefully counted. His daughters were sent out to build connections, no matter who they married, as long as they were useful. As for those bastard sons, they naturally had to sacrifice and fight for the great cause. Even if they had to risk their lives, they had to ensure the prosperous development of the country of Daluo. In the Pingjin grassland, where resources were scarce, they would do anything. Sometimes they would even wipe out an entire tribe just for half a month's worth of food. Your so-called good fortune is really not something that ordinary people can enjoy. Great Elder Kong Een laughed mockingly. Cut the crap. King Feline's face twisted as he slammed the pillar of the water prison. If you don't bring him to me by tomorrow, don't blame me for saying anything. After all, my grandson may be young, but he's my grandson. Logically speaking, he should be buried with a traitor like me. King Feline sneered. Do you believe that if you do anything to hurt that child, the little crown princess will be the first to come after you? After saying this, Great Elder Kong Een felt that there was no way to continue talking with this person, so he turned around and left. He felt that if he continued to talk to this person, he might not be able to restrain himself from killing him. It was too unreasonable. His self-restraint as a monk was almost worn out in front of King Feline. Taking a deep breath, Kong Een turned and left, leaving King Feline's roar behind his mind. Kong Een, King Feline's roar came. Tomorrow's sunset is your deadline. Wait. Chapter 5108. You mustn't forget. This prince is capable of doing anything. Of course you can do anything. For a scum like you, who else can you think of in this lifetime besides yourself? Great Elder Kong Een furiously struck out with his palm. The vast and mighty force pushed the wave forward and slammed heavily on the water cage, producing a loud bang. Less than 4 hours after Great Elder Kong Een angrily left the water prison with a dark and bright face, everyone in the imperial court had heard about it. Everyone was guessing what had happened. After all, Great Elder Kong Een had set up a soundproof barrier when he had a private conversation with Prince Feline. With Great Elder's cultivation, no one could casually approach him. Hence, everyone was very curious about the contents of their conversation. What exactly did Prince Feline say to Great Elder Kong Een to provoke Great Elder to this extent? That was Great Elder Kong Een, who rarely got angry even once in 100 years. Prince Feline was truly quite remarkable to actually anger Great Elder to the point of smashing the water prison. The ministers in the imperial court were all secretly guessing, extremely curious about this matter. When the news reached the young crown princess's ears, the little stoic had just finished washing up and was led to the table by His Highness the Crown Prince. The two of them sat down to eat breakfast. Saichi, this little girl, vividly recounted the matter she had scouted out to the young crown princess in full detail. The little stoic didn't pay much attention and was currently focused on scooping up the porridge in her bowl with a spoon. Her eyes sparkled with every mouthful. When His Highness the Crown Prince, who was sitting across from her, saw this, he very cheerfully said, "The small kitchen cooked pretty good porridge today. Reward." "Yes, Your Highness." Saichi jogged outside with a grin. Saishio shook her head helplessly and said quietly, "Please forgive me, Your Highness. This girl's personality is truly too jumpy." "It's fine." Prince Emo waved his hand and looked at his wife with a grin. "Jojo, did you sleep well last night?" "Emachem, did darling Emo disturb your sleep?" "No." "Then, do we have anything special to do today?" "Let's read." Prince Emo, his wife was too much. The weather was so good today. Why was she reading at home? The imperial doctor said that Jojo is in good health. She needs to move around more after she's pregnant so that her delivery will be smoother. So, how about we go out for a walk today? Jojo pursed his lips and suddenly changed the topic. "Will my mother and the others come back?" She suddenly sat up straight and looked at him with bright eyes. "Are we going out to meet my mother?" The crown prince's sea of jealousy rippled slightly. He muttered unhappily, "You weren't willing to accompany me on a walk. When you heard that we were going to see Mother, your eyes lit up." "Okay," the little crown princess replied decisively. "Humph." The little stoic suddenly smiled at him and stretched her hand across the table, poking the back of his hand as she said crisply, "Outing." Emo Yin's heart also rippled. He pushed the chair away and walked quickly to her side. He pulled her over with one hand. "Wife, you're so beautiful when you smile at your husband. Great joy for your highness. Great joy for the crown princess." While the two were talking, they saw Hu Dequan leading 20 or so people in 2 rows. They were holding a large pile of gifts as they walked in with smiles on their faces. The little stoic looked at him expressionlessly. Where did the joy come from? Hu Dequan almost couldn't continue laughing, and he quickly cut to the chase. His Majesty was overjoyed when he learned that the Crown Princess was pregnant with a dragon fetus, so he prepared many gifts for the Crown Princess. They continued at 12 o'clock and went to eat. Chapter 5109. I'm already 3 months pregnant, and the Emperor only remembered to congratulate me? Sir Jojo muttered expressionlessly. Hu Dequan almost burst into tears again. This little ancestor, you didn't say anything, did you? The Emperor only learned about it from the Empress last night. Didn't he rush over early in the morning to deliver this and that for you? Prince Emo also waved his hand expressionlessly. Leave it there. We're just about to go out. When we return, we'll take a look if we're interested. Eunuch Hu, you're His Highness, you're willful. We servants will leave the gift list and items here first. Eunuch Hu said carefully. Eunuch Hu said cautiously, May I know where Your Highness the Crown Prince and Crown Princess are heading out of the palace? This servant will inform His Majesty and the Empress when I return. Now that the Crown Princess is pregnant with the dragon fetus, she has to be more careful when she goes out. The little Crown Princess waved her hand energetically. No need to worry. We're going out for a walk. We'll be back before sunset. After saying that, he took a small step forward and walked out of the door in a very nimble manner. Eunuch Hu's eyes were wide open. This little Crown Princess walked with such vigor and vigor. She was too fast. The Crown Prince couldn't help but laugh. He glanced at the dazed Eunuch Hu. All right, you can go back first. Just leave the gift list there. Imperial Father was really stingy. He should have given her a gift long ago. His wife was already 3 months pregnant, and he only thought of giving her a gift now. How stingy. If the Emperor knew his son's thoughts at this moment, he would definitely want to slap him to death. He only found out about the little Crown Princess pregnancy yesterday, and he came to give her a gift this morning. Wasn't his actions fast enough? Wasn't his reaction fast enough? Of course, the Emperor was also quite excited. He was originally all alone. Now that his wife was awake and his son had a wife, he would have a grandson soon. There was no need to mention how happy he was. Heavens, he was about to be a grandfather. Just thinking about it made him happy. Although his son was henpecked by his wife and was used to being a hands-off shopkeeper, he was still more reliable when it came to giving birth to children. The two of them were still young, and they still had a long way to go. 2 babies in 3 years, 3 babies in 5 years, and so on. While the Emperor was happily thinking about this, the Crown Prince had already prepared a carriage and led the Crown Princess out of the palace. Kongyin rushed over early in the morning, only to find that it was empty. Her frown deepened. Classmate, Emo leaned against the side of the carriage expressionlessly. Looking at the 3 heads squeezed together beside his wife, he felt gloomy for a while. He had originally wanted to travel hand in hand with his wife and enjoy the world of the two of them intimately. Who would have thought that once they got on the carriage, his wife would release the little monkey Kong Kong and Emo? Why is it called a family outing? Now the 4 heads were huddled together, sitting in a row opposite him. Student Emo felt like crying. He was like an outsider, sitting on the other side of the carriage, and could only look on helplessly as that little bald thief, Kong Kong, chatted happily with his wife. Of course, most of the time, he was alone and talking to himself. For example, Benefactress, where are we going now? Are we going to pick up Benefactress's mother? Benefactress's mother, how is she now? Are they all okay? Emo obediently placed his hands on his knees and sat upright. He didn't pay much attention to anyone. The little monkey's face was full of impatience. He couldn't help but roll his eyes at the back of the little fat monk's head. His wife, on the other hand, was very patient, unlike her usual self. Chapter 5110. Basically, for every 10 questions the little monk asked, she would occasionally answer. The two of them chatted very happily, and they chatted all the way. Prince Emo was very depressed, and he really wanted to kick this nagging little monk out of the new Fortress Starfield. But his wife said that the little monk had not seen real sunlight for many days, and he should be allowed to come out and bask in the sun. This would be good for the child's bone development. Prince Mo was depressed, and he was depressed the whole way. The little monk suddenly said, "Benefactress, why don't you let Wang Wang out too?" No. The benefactress heartlessly rejected his request, and the little monk could not help but pout. She was already annoyed enough with a nagging monk, and now there was a nagging Guang Guang as well. How was she going to live her life? Was she going to go for a walk or not? Was she going to see her mother? Just listening to these two nagging was enough to drive her crazy. Guang Guang has been quite miserable recently. The people in the star field don't like to talk to him, and they find him annoying when they see him, and they keep telling him to shut up. Little Monk also doesn't like to talk to him. But thinking about his experience, Little Monk can't help but empathize with him. The more I think about it, the sadder I feel. Everyone, just listening to the Little Monk's first half, one would think that he was overflowing with sympathy, but the second half was not right. After talking for so long, this little monk was just feeling sorry for himself. Arbor could not help but twitch the corner of her mouth, and she looked at him, amused and annoyed. If you don't nag all the time, why would the brothers and sisters in the star field find you annoying? The little monk lowered his little head and said pitifully, Little Monk was born to worry and nag. If not, Master would not have left Little Monk with Benefactress. Little Monk knows that although Master doesn't usually say anything and only chants Amitabha, he must despise Little Monk in his heart. Arbor wanted to laugh, but she could not help but feel sorry for this sentimental little rascal. She hugged him, raised her hand, and lightly knocked on his bald little head. What nonsense are you babbling about? That old bald thief Kongyin has always cared about you the most. Your master usually doesn't say anything. However, his concern for you has never been erased. He's just not very reliable. When Sir Jojo thought of this, he couldn't help but snort softly. He raised his hand and patted Little Baldy's head. With a thought, he released the light condensing mirror. As soon as the light congealing mirror appeared, he immediately took 2 steps forward. When he saw Prince Mo sitting opposite him with a dark expression, he immediately stopped. He very sensibly stepped back and squeezed until he was next to the little monkey and sat down with her in a row. As a result, Prince Mo's seat was empty except for him, emitting an extremely low black pressure. In a row of chairs in Arbor, 5 people were squeezed together, head to head, arm to arm, tightly glued together. Crown Prince Mo's mood became increasingly displeased when he saw this polarized phenomenon. What was going on? Why was his life so hard? Usually, he had to fight for favor with the spirits and beasts, but now he had to fight for favor with a few little radishes. It was too infuriating. Prince Mo's face was full of displeasure, unhappiness, and anger. Arbor looked up and saw the Crown Prince's dark, handsome face, and could not help but want to laugh. She consciously moved to sit next to the Crown Prince. Tomorrow morning, before 10 o'clock in the morning to catch up. Chapter 51:11. She raised her hand to rub her husband's dark face and couldn't help but giggle. Husband, you're emitting a gloomy aura from head to toe. Humph. Prince Mo twisted his head. But when he saw Sir Jojo laugh, his handsome face could no longer keep a straight face. Arbor raised her hand to rub his face and tilted her head to look at him. Husband, where are we going to see Mother? The carriage was heading west of the city. Arbor didn't know what Mo Lien was up to. She tugged at his sleeve, a rare hint of curiosity appearing on her stoic face. How about I guess? Your father knew early on that King Duo Luo and the others were holed up in the black swamp of the Pingjin Prairie. But he never made a move. He was waiting for this King Duo Luo to walk right into his trap. After discovering Duo Luo's movements, your father made first-hand arrangements. He also considered that they might make a move against the Qiao family, so he preemptively moved everyone away. Perhaps because he was in a hurry to move, Father probably didn't even tell Mother. Afterwards, the 2 fakes ended up empty-handed in the Qiao residence. They beat them at their own game and settled down. Coincidentally, your mother summoned them for a banquet, so they left in high spirits, intending to start business. Prince Mo broke into a wide grin and nodded repeatedly. Wife, you're so smart. Perhaps your father already knew the identities of the two fakes and secretly sent people to keep an eye on them for a long time. Arbor snorted. So even if I didn't make a move that day, the two fakes probably wouldn't have been able to escape. This emperor and the muddle-headed old great king of the Mo kingdom were truly two polar opposites. Your father really can't say that you're a scammer in the future, Sir Jojo said with a stoic face, because with your personality, you've most likely inherited the emperor's teachings. You've used the same trick to trick others, but you're even better than that. Prince Mo blinked and leaned closer to his wife. Wife, are you praising your husband? I'm not praising you. The little crown princess glanced at him and moved to the side. Prince Mo didn't mind. He moved closer to her and lifted a corner of the curtain. Seeing that the sunlight was quite good, he rolled up the curtain. The sunlight shone into the carriage and fell on everyone's body, making them feel warm and cozy. Lord Guangguang squeezed beside Kong Kong and hurriedly asked, Where are you taking Lord Guangguang? When he saw Xiao Mu, he actually very much wanted to approach her. However, Crown Prince Mo was glaring at him like a tiger eyeing its prey, so Guangguang could only sit obediently next to Kong Kong, not daring to move at will. Won't we know when we get there? Little Monkey snapped at Little Baldy. These two bald, Mo-brain fellows were really annoying. Sometimes, when they were long-winded, one blowing and one singing, it made people want to stuff their mouths with a handkerchief. Kong Kong, they don't want to say. Why don't you tell this old man? Congealing Jing said to the little monk like an old man. Kong Kong shook his head and said seriously, This little monk is only hitching a ride. This little monk isn't sure where the destination is. Arbor was about to die from laughing at the two little rascals' conversation. He looked at them speechlessly. Turning to look at the large field outside the window, Arbor had a flash of inspiration. He suddenly said, We've been here before. Oh, I know. Your father hid my mother and the others in Half Moon Cliff's splendid mountain villa. Mo Yin smiled and nodded. Chapter 51:12. Jojo was right. When he heard the news, he couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. This time, if it wasn't for his father's amazing foresight, the Qiao family might have suffered even more. If his parents-in-law were injured or met with any mishap, Jojo would definitely be very upset. When Arbor and the others arrived near Half Moon Cliff, they could see thousands of acres of fertile land. The crops were growing well. Arbor remembered that the last time she came, she had secretly watered the fields with holy water. She also had the holy soil turn over the soil. Naturally, the farmers in this area were blessed. As for the farmers who planted crops for her, regardless of whether the harvest was good or not, their family would definitely be rich this year. Hey, this village seems to have expanded a lot compared to the last time we came here. Yes. Mo Yin smiled and nodded. The soil here nourishes the people. Many farmers have voluntarily migrated here. The number of people who have settled here has increased in the past year. Wife, there are a lot of people who want to rent the land in your hands. As long as his wife's fields were planted, they would always make a profit. Not only would the harvest be good, but no matter what crops were planted in the fields, they would always grow well. There was never much to worry about. In a year, the harvest was 8 to 10 times more than others. Which tenant wouldn't want to take the fertile land to plant? Moreover, Arbor's method of collecting land rent was quite humane. She took 40% of the rent, which was 10% less than other farmers' 50%. The income was 10 to 8 times more than other farmers. In this way, although these farmers only received 60% of the food, the harvest was 10 to 8 times more than other farmers. It was a great deal. In the beginning, this news was kept a secret. No one knew who was the one who spread it, but it soon spread from mouth to mouth. Everyone said that the Half Moon Cliff's fields were heavenly fields. Whatever they planted, they would grow well. Naturally, everyone wanted to take the Half Moon Cliff's fields. Groups of farmers migrated here and competed to take up the land. Arbor heard Mo Yin's words and nodded. She naturally knew that her fields were very different from other people's. It was just a few drops of holy water and a few pinches of holy land. This kind of vitality effect could be maintained for about 3 to 5 years. After 3 to 5 years, the holy water and holy land would have to continue to turn over the fields here to maintain it. The carriage had already reached the dirt road at the entrance of the village. Recently, the road had been paved with stone slabs, so there were piles of bluestone slabs on both sides of the road. In Arbor, when they were halfway along, a man suddenly appeared in front of them, and, without a word, fell down in front of them and began to cry out in pain. The young Crown Prince Consort and His Highness the Crown Prince exchanged astonished glances. Kong couldn't help but rush to their side and lean against the window to take a look. "Amit Ba," he shouted. "Benefactress, this benefactor is lying in front of our carriage. Is he trying to extort money?" Arbor's mouth twitched. She really didn't expect that there would still be people who dared to touch her porcelain. She reached out to touch her face. "Could it be that my face looks a lot more benevolent?" The Crown Prince laughed and reached out to hug his little wife. "What are you saying? Jojo has always been a kind little immortal girl." The little monk sighed and shook his head. "Benefactress is her husband. Aren't you afraid that the wind will cut your tongue?" Chapter 51:13. Sir Guangguang hastily nodded in full agreement. How was this fierce woman kind-hearted or peaceful? She was clearly brimming with malice, and whoever she offended would suffer misfortune. Arbor swept a glance at the light, congealing mirror, and the latter shrunk its neck before hastily saying, "This old man can go down and take a look for you guys to see what's going on." "No need." Arbor cast him a sidelong glance. This guy was so proactive, so he probably had some little scheme in mind. He really couldn't miss a second of this little guy with a belly full of evil tricks. Humph! Sir Guangguang sat upright and still with his hands on his knees, a hint of anger hanging on his small face. "Woman, you don't believe this old man." The little monkey couldn't resist twitching his mouth. He tried to restrain himself, but he ultimately couldn't restrain himself and smacked that smooth little head of his. "You shut up. You keep calling me this old man, this old man. You're just a freaking 3-year-old brat, yet you still have the nerve to call me this old man." He really wanted to slap this guy to death. His lousy mouth was full of seniority, making them all seem like his juniors. In reality, the light, congealing mirror had indeed gone through several thousand or even tens of thousands of years of tempering before finally forming a holy weapon spirit. There was nothing wrong with him insisting on calling himself an old senior. It was just that this old senior's image was probably too infuriating. Sir Guangguang pursed his small mouth and glanced at the little monkey resentfully. He inwardly thought, "Why are human women so scary? These women beside me don't look like good people at all." Unfortunately, one had no choice but to lower one's head when living under someone else's roof. Sir Guangguang lamented ruefully. On the other side, the little stoic ignored him and gave Xiao Yi, who was driving the carriage, a look. Xiao Yi cheerfully jumped off the carriage and walked to the person lying on the ground in a few steps. He stretched out his long leg and kicked that guy. Hey, get up, get up. Io, 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 io." That person hugged his left leg and curled up, wailing like a ghost and howling like a wolf. This wailing attracted many of the village's women and children. Upon seeing the person lying on the ground, Aunt Lee at the village entrance couldn't resist pursing her lips and revealing a contemptuous expression. "Blind Wong, that scoundrel, is starting to extort people again." "That's right. He just extorted a sickly madam here an hour ago. He must have gotten used to it. Now he wants to extort another sum of money. TSK, TSK. That madam is kind-hearted. She spent money to avoid disaster. But look at the young man driving the carriage. TSK, TSK. He is really spirited. Who knows how things will develop today?" That's right. It's time for Blind Wong to hit a wall and kick an iron plate. Otherwise, he'll really think that no one in this world can defeat him. Arbor was stunned and glanced at her husband. "Who would come earlier than us? Has the news that Mother is here been found out?" Mo Lien smiled. "Last night, Imperial Father sent someone to inform father-in-law and mother-in-law that the danger has been averted. It seems that my father-in-law and mother-in-law have made quite a few friends while we were away. Arbor was delighted on the inside and nodded. Mother's life is too monotonous. It's good to make some friends. She then creased her brows. This scoundrel lives in Half Moon Cliff's village, but he extorted Mother's friends. Other people who don't know will think that our family is like this. It's too disrespectful. Mo Lien sneered, her icy voice passing through the curtain. Are you getting up or not? Chapter 51:14. Blind Wang, who was lying on the ground pretending to be unconscious, only heard a cold voice enter his ears. His body trembled for no reason. He felt that this person's voice was a little scary. It was like a sharp blade that could cut through his body with just the sound of the voice. He didn't want to get up, but he was unwilling to do so. An hour ago, he had done the same thing, lying in front of the madam's carriage and easily earning 30 spirit coins. Looking at the magnificence of this carriage today, it was even better than that madam's carriage. Shouldn't rich people like them be the most afraid of trouble and be generous? When encountering such a small matter, most of them would just give some spirit coins and chase the person away. Who would have thought that the next sentence from that cold voice would be like 5 bolts of lightning crashing down on him? If you don't want to get up, then don't ever get up. Mo Yin's voice did not fluctuate in the slightest as she ordered him motionlessly. Xiao Yi laughed mischievously. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and he stretched out his leg to step on this scoundrel's calf. Crack, crack. 2 sounds were heard. This scoundrel immediately shed the truest tears. He cried and hugged his leg, rolling left and right, back and forth on the ground, howling. This time, the ghostly wails and howls sounded much more realistic. After all, this time his leg was really broken. Those women who were watching the show were all shocked and hurriedly avoided the eaves. Arbor and Mo Lien got out of the carriage and walked down expressionlessly. When the onlookers saw this, they were immediately shocked. Their gazes could not help but focus on the 2 of them. They had completely forgotten about Blind Wang. Poor Blind Wang, who had been eating and waiting for death all his life, swindled and swindled everywhere. Today, he suffered a great crime. His 2 legs hurt so much that he could not stop howling. Arbor asked expressionlessly, "Is there no one in charge of these villages? Who can move in just because they want to?" When Xiao Yi saw the little crown princess's expression, he knew that things were going to get worse. He hurriedly replied, "This subordinate will call Manager Fong of Splendid Villa over. Logically speaking, the villages near Half Moon Cliff should be managed by Manager Fong and the nannies in charge. Since there was such a scoundrel who blocked their path and extorted them, they naturally could not absolve themselves from the blame. However, there was no need for Xiao Yi to pass the message. Steward Fong brought 3 to 5 steward older female servants and hurried over. Steward Fong was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. When he received the news that the blind scoundrel king had stopped the crown princess carriage, he felt as if the sky was about to collapse. It was one thing for Blind Wang to cause trouble normally, but today he was so blind that he dared to cause trouble in front of His Highness the Crown Prince and that young mistress. Just how reckless was he to do that? Arbor stared coldly at Steward Fong, who was wiping his sweat. Whose relative is this? Come out now. If you don't step forward now, you'll have to bear the consequences when I find out who your relative is. Steward Fong and the others could not help but shudder. The last time he met the young crown princess, there was no conflict, and the crown prince and his wife had only rested at Half Moon Cliff for a short period of time. Therefore, strictly speaking, as servants, they had not really come into contact with the crown prince and the crown princess. This time, they had truly witnessed how terrifying these 2 were. Just looking at how Blind Wang was being taught a lesson and rolling around on the ground, they felt a chill run down their spines. "No one will step forward," the young crown princess said coldly and moved her finger slightly. Chapter 51:15. She was already holding a dictum talisman in her hand. "I'll remind you one last time," the little stoic said icily. "After this crown princess finds out the truth, he, his relatives, and all of you who are covering up for him will be treated equally. All of you will be judged guilty. Plop, plop. Manager Fong and the others all knelt on the ground weakly. A plump, elderly nanny wailed as she rolled out from behind Manager Fong. Unable to bear the pressure, she repeatedly kowtowed and admitted her guilt. Your Highness the Crown Prince, please spare my life. Crown Princess, please spare my life. It was this old servant. This old servant didn't know the severity of the matter and left my nephew here. This elderly nanny was filled with regret. Of all the people this blind Wong could extort, he just had to extort this stoic crown princess. Although they were far away in splendid villa, they had also heard of the crown princess's reputation in the capital. Arbor looked at Manager Fong with a sneer. Out of trust, this crown princess gave you full authority to manage this manor and farmland. But what happened in the end? What did you give his princess in return? Manager Fong was drenched in cold sweat, and his back was completely soaked by it. He hastily kowtowed several times in succession, and each time he kowtowed heavily until he bled. He didn't dare to be the slightest bit negligent, indecisive, and improper in handling matters. The little crown princess coldly gave him a 4-word evaluation. I think you don't need to continue being a manager. Manager Fong nearly collapsed on the ground. He hastily crawled forward and repeatedly pleaded while sobbing, reporting to the crown princess it was this old servant's fault. It was this old servant. This old servant was soft-hearted and agreed to elderly Nanny Wong's request. This old servant won't dare to do it again in the future. May the crown princess give this old servant another chance. Whoa. The plump, elderly Nanny Wong was filled with regret, but Manager Fong was so regretful that his intestines were about to turn green. At that time, when old lady Wong had begged him, he really didn't want to keep blind Wong, this idler here. This person couldn't carry anything on her shoulders and didn't do any decent work. She was like a piece of rat excrement, stirring in the soup all day long. She often extorted a chicken or a duck from the host family and lived on Nanny Wong's monthly salary. Originally, he didn't want to let him stay, but Nanny Wong cried bitterly with snot and tears. She said that she would have to rely on this nephew to take care of her in the future. Steward Fong's heart softened for a moment, causing today's calamity. He was so regretful that he wished he could slap himself to death for making the decision that day. How could he bear to throw away such a lucrative job as the head manager of the splendid villa? As the chief steward, he had a monthly salary of 15,000 spirit coins. In addition, there were also countless gifts that he received during festivals and festivals. The most important thing was that other families might not be able to grow their crops and lack food. However, they had all kinds of food in their residence and would not lack food at all. Half Moon Cliff's vast fields were now famous throughout the entire Divine Continent. Everyone couldn't help but envy the farmers at the foot of Half Moon Cliff. They envied them for being able to get such a good job and live a prosperous life. They never had to suffer from hunger. When Steward Fong thought of this, he cried bitterly and became more agitated. How could he lose his title as a steward? Even if he had to die, he had to keep this job. Crown Princess, this old servant knows his mistake. May the Crown Princess give this old servant another chance to redeem himself. Steward Fong cried and cried. The young Crown Princess coldly ordered, "Go and invite Manager Hu of Kai-Dai Pavilion here." Chapter 51:16. Have shopkeeper Hu temporarily take over splendid mountain villa, as well as all the farmlands within 100 kilometers of this place. When Manager Fong heard this, his entire body collapsed to the ground, and he kept thinking, it's over, it's over, it's over, it's over, it's over. It seems that today's matter can't be settled peacefully. The little Crown Princess is going to remove my title as manager and find someone else to replace it. Steward Fong felt a chill in his heart. With a miserable expression, he looked at Wong Momo, who had fallen to the side, and couldn't help but grumble, "I told you to discipline your nephew properly." Truly, a loving mother spoils her son. This time, it's really because of you. Senior servant Wang had long been scared silly, and she didn't know how to react for a long time. Manager Fong braced himself and stammered as he cried, "Crown Princess, please give this old servant another chance. This half-moon cliff is surrounded by thousands of acres of fertile land, and there are several hundred farmlands. These matters. The new manager definitely won't be able to take care of them all at once. This old servant is willing to atone for my sins by meritorious service and wholeheartedly help that manager. Also, Crown Princess, please don't expel this old servant from Splendid Mountain Villa." When he spoke of the pitiful part, Manager Fong couldn't help but sob bitterly. Arbor glanced at him and considered for a long time before nodding and saying, "Since that's the case, then you can stay and properly learn how to manage from shopkeeper who." Arbor said coldly, "The manager this princess wants is someone who can manage matters and people, and someone who can help this princess share her burdens, and not someone who blindly acts as a good old man, selling this face and that favor. This princess doesn't have that many favors to sell to you." After experiencing this matter, how would Manager Fong dare to sell any face or favor? He nodded repeatedly and cried out, Yes, this old servant will definitely properly correct and properly learn, and definitely won't disappoint the crown princess expectations. As for you," Arbor glanced coldly at senior servant Wang, "take your rascal nephew and scram far away. Don't let this crown princess see you again." Old maid Wang immediately collapsed to the ground. She couldn't figure out how such a small matter of extortion could escalate to such a high level. The little crown princess was so unreasonable that it was almost frightening. The remaining female stewards of Splendid Villa didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They all shrunk their heads and knelt behind Steward Fong. Their heads were lowered like frosted eggplants, crooked and smacking their lips. Arbor coldly glanced at them. Kai Xiao, who was in the other carriage, immediately came forward and bowed. "Go with the nanny in charge and check the accounts of these days." "Yes." Kai Xiao raised her hand and led 3 to 5 palace maids who were very nimble. She quickly walked to the front of the ashen-faced steward Mama and said indifferently, "Mama, please. We still have to check the accounts for nearly half a year today. Don't let the masters wait too long." The Mama trembled as she stood up and nodded repeatedly. She didn't dare to make a sound and hurriedly left with Kai Xiao and the others. When the two people got on the carriage again, there was silence all around. Even the villagers who were watching the show didn't dare to make a sound. The carriage drove towards the main gate of Splendid Mountain Villa in silence. Manager Fong and the others also didn't dare to complain and trotted all the way to follow. "Mother, which court do they live in?" In a flash, the carriage stopped at the main gate of Splendid Mountain Villa. Arbor asked with a cold face as she was led out of the carriage by Prince Mo. Chapter 51:17. An old nanny with a proper appearance hurried forward and bowed. She said respectfully, "Master and Madam are currently living in Silver Heron Courtyard. Your Highness, Crown Princess, please." The nanny didn't dare to be negligent. She lowered her head and trotted forward to lead the way. Not long after, she led Arbor's party to a garden. There were 2 rows of pomegranate trees in front of the door. From the angle of the head, the garden was quiet and elegant. It seemed that Steward Fong and the others didn't dare to neglect father and mother. Sir Jojo pulled Prince Mo and quickly walked through the flower-shaped arch of Silver Heron Courtyard. They saw the pavilion not far from the entrance. Wei Ziqin was sitting opposite a middle-aged woman, drinking tea and chatting. Thick cotton curtains were hung around the pavilion, blocking a lot of the wind. Wei Ziqin had her back to them. The middle-aged woman sitting opposite her had a sickly look, and her face was a little sallow. From the perspective of Arbor's doctors, the initial judgment was that this madam's condition was probably caused by spleen deficiency or dampness. Of course, there were some hidden toxins that could cause a person's complexion to be sallow and weak. She might gasp for breath after taking 2 steps. The servant girl, Xia Yun, was holding some tea and snacks. Just as she was about to enter the pavilion, she saw the little crown princess and the others walking over. Xia Yun's hands trembled and she knelt down. She cried out in surprise, "Madam, His Highness the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess are back." Wei Ziqin hurriedly turned her head and immediately stood up with a face full of joy. "Little Mo and Jojo are back. Why didn't you inform us in advance?" Wei Ziqin hurriedly walked out of the pavilion and raised her hand to hold her daughter with a smile. "You went to Wangchuan for too long this time. Mother has been waiting for the stars and the moon at home. Finally, you two are back." "Chow Chow, you must be tired from the long journey with Xiao," and Mo Arbor shook his head. "It's all right." She was definitely tired, and there were many dangers along the way. Thinking about what happened in the River of Forgetfulness, the Emperor did not tell her mother and the others about it. Since that was the case, then there was no need to talk about it. In any case, the matter of the River of Forgetfulness had already passed. Telling them about those dangerous situations would only increase their worries. "Jojo, Murphy, did your trip to Forgotten River go smoothly?" Arbor nodded again expressionlessly. "Not bad." Prince Mo almost laughed out loud. His wife's words were so funny. His mother-in-law wanted to chat with her for a while more, but she felt that she couldn't continue the conversation. Seeing Wei Ziqin's speechless expression, Prince Mo hurriedly added, "This time, the River of Forgetfulness was quite smooth. We formed the Killer Heavenly Fate battle group and requisitioned an unnamed island in the River of Forgetfulness. The battle group has developed quite well. Also, Jojo became the owner of the island. The scenery in the River of Forgetfulness is not bad. After the four seas have calmed down, we can bring father-in-law and mother-in-law to the island to stay for a while. Just treat it as a vacation." Wei Ziqin was a little dumbfounded. Her daughter went out for a spin and became the owner of some island. Didn't she just become the head of the Mu family not long ago? So soon, she became the owner of some island. Jojo nodded with a serious expression. Suddenly, the corner of his mouth twitched. "Mother, I have good news to tell you. You're going to be a grandmother soon." For a moment, Wei Ziqin thought that there was something wrong with her ears. She looked at her daughter in surprise and joy. After a long while, she found her excited voice again. Daughter, you?" Her gaze shifted to her belly, and she couldn't help but cry out in joy. "Daughter, you're pregnant." Chapter 51:18. Wei Ziqin alternated between joy and worry. "Jojo, why aren't you staying in the estate? If there's anything, just have someone inform me." The little stoic waved her hand and said, "Mom, I'm very good. Our family's baby Mo is very obedient and doesn't make a fuss at all." As she spoke, this fellow even lightly patted her stomach. Wei Ziqin couldn't help but feel melancholy and worried again. Her daughter still had a childish temper, but she was about to give birth to a child. Wei Ziqin was worried and happy at the same time. She was worried and happy at the same time. Her emotions fluctuated up and down, and it was indescribably satisfying. Look at me. I was so engrossed in talking with you that I forgot to introduce you. This is the Countess of Huainan, a new friend that Mother made." Wei Ziqin felt very apologetic for neglecting the guest because she was preoccupied with chattering with her daughter and son-in-law earlier. The Countess of Huainan walked forward and respectfully bowed towards Mo, Lien, and Arbor. "This subject greets Your Highness the Crown Prince and Her Highness the Crown Princess." Prince Mo had always put on an amiable little white rabbit appearance in front of his mother-in-law. Therefore, no matter how tyrannical this fellow was outside, in front of Wei Ziqin, Qiao Zhongbong, and the others, he always pretended to be as gentle as a spring breeze and treated people kindly. Wei Ziqin always felt that her son-in-law's temperament was especially good. She often worried that he wouldn't be able to suppress those native officials of the Divine Prefecture when he went out to handle matters. She also frequently reminded her daughter to not always bully little Mo for not having a temper and not always exploit little Mo. Sir Jojo's ears were about to grow calluses from listening to her. This fellow was accustomed to putting on an act in front of his mother-in-law, and Sir Jojo had repeatedly expressed his disdain for him. At this time, Prince Immerse smiled very amiably again with a gentle expression. He warmly said to the Countess of Huainan, who was curtsying, "Madam doesn't need to be so courteous. You are my mother-in-law's friend, which makes you my elder. You may rise." Jojo secretly looked at her husband with disdain. Mother was always worried about little Mo's nice guy personality. He would probably be at a disadvantage outside. However, her little Mo's personality was completely different from the one he displayed in front of her. Madame Count Huainan lightly coughed twice, stood up straight with a smile, and said, "Today, this subject's wife specially came to deliver the invitation to Sister Wei. Since the invitation has been delivered, I won't disturb your Highness family reunion any longer." Wei Ziqin smiled and said, "I'm sorry for the neglect. Madam, you came all the way here and you're leaving so soon. Let me see you off." When Wei Ziqin returned from escorting the Countess of Huainan, she saw her son-in-law standing alone in front of the pavilion, looking at her pitifully with his beautiful phoenix eyes. Wei Ziqin's heart softened, and she hurriedly walked up and asked, "Little Mo, where's Jojo? Why are you here alone?" Jojo went to see his sister-in-law, Xiao Yao. It was naturally inappropriate for a man like him to go over. His little wife turned hostile and heartlessly left him here, minding her own business and walking away. Mo, Little Monkey, Kong Kong, and Guang Guang were also following him. If you were to drag them along, wouldn't he be all by himself? Wei Ziqin was a bit amused, but when she saw her son-in-law's pitiful appearance, she felt a bit sorry for him. She hurriedly said, "Your father and second uncle will be back soon. Mother will take you to the front yard to sit for a while. Jojo shouldn't be looking at you for too long. He'll be out soon. Tomorrow, I'll catch up on 2 more chapters." Chapter 5119. In the end, little Mo accompanied his father-in-law and second uncle and chatted for more than 2 hours, but his wife still didn't come over. His heart was filled with grievances and melancholy. Don't mention it. His wife abandoned him and went to chat with his sister-in-law for such a long time. She wasn't a chatty person. It was most likely that Xiao Yao had nothing better to do and kept chatting with his wife. Arbor and Xiao Yao hadn't seen each other for a long time. Now that they were talking about babies, they really couldn't stop. It must have been hard on Mo Ruo, this rash fellow, to wander back and forth in the room like a wandering soul. Although he didn't understand, he didn't disturb the 2 sisters-in-law's conversation. The little crown princess had already taken Xiao Yao's pulse earlier. As a martial artist, her physique was stronger than ordinary people. However, she was still a little weak after giving birth. As long as she had a good rest and paid attention to her diet, she would be fine. She didn't need to take medicine to recuperate. After Xiao Mu finished taking Xiao Yao's pulse, she was fortunately unruffled as she took her own pulse. Xiao Yao saw her frown slightly and couldn't help but be on tenterhooks. "Crown Princess, are you feeling unwell?" Arbor shook her head. This was what she felt the most strange. Logically speaking, there would always be some changes in the body after pregnancy. Take Peony, for example. She was a girl who was full of vigor before, but after pregnancy, she would also have some symptoms of pregnancy and would always be a little weak. But her? The little crown princess knew her body best. Not to mention that she didn't feel any weakness or pregnancy symptoms. There was nothing wrong with her. She was fine everywhere. She could still split mountains and seas with one punch. The most important thing was that every time she woke up, her body felt light and full of strength. She even inexplicably improved in her realm. She was too embarrassed to mention this to others. Now that she saw her sister-in-law, she didn't care so much about what she said. She simply dragged a stool and sat in front of Xiao Yao, carefully discussing some pregnancy matters with her. In the end, she even asked her with a serious face, "Sister-in-law, do you feel that way? How do you feel?" "It's just that after sleeping, I always feel like my body is floating, as if I have an inexhaustible amount of strength, as if I can break seas and split mountains with a single punch." Her sister-in-law looked at her expressionlessly and said, "No." The little stoic replied with an "oh," and the two of them sank into a brief silence. After a while, Arbor couldn't help but ask, "Then if you get pregnant, will your realm increase?" What? At first, Xiao Yao thought that she had misheard, but when she saw the little crown princess's hopeful eyes, she was sure that she hadn't misheard. She replied expressionlessly, "No, only a weirdo would be like this." She could still increase her cultivation after getting pregnant. The little crown princess replied with an "oh." This time, even the little monk couldn't help but roll his eyes. "Benefactress, please listen to Xiao Na." Arbor turned her head and saw a pair of short legs sitting side by side on a brocade couch by the window. They both had a shiny bald head and stared straight at her with round eyes. "Speak if you have something to say." "Benefactress, although Xiao Na doesn't understand what you're saying, I feel that you're always comparing the strange things that happen to you with normal people. This is a very abnormal thing." Xiao Yao held back her laughter and nodded expressionlessly. "Crown Princess, Kong Kong is absolutely right. Although this child was long-winded, she always hit the nail on the head. This was exactly the reason." You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.